He was just fixing the copier. Or so they thought. No one looked twice at the black janitor in the corporate office, until the CEO's million-dollar deal collapsed, and the only person who knew why was the man they ignored. Security dragged him out, accused him of sabotage, but the footage told a different story, because the man they called maintenance wasn't there to clean floors. He was there to expose who was really dirty. What happens next will make you question everything about justice in the workplace. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The morning air outside Roosevelt High School smelled faintly of rain and bleach, a mix of cleansing and memory. The custodial truck rumbled to a stop by the side gate, and a tall black man in a faded gray hoodie stepped out, rolling his shoulders as if to shake off the weight of the world. His name was Dr. Malcolm Reeves, and beneath that hoodie, behind the tired eyes, stood the new principal no one knew was coming. He carried no briefcase, no ID badge that said principal, just a janitor's cart with cleaning spray, rags and a mop. His plan was simple: see the school before the school saw him. He wanted truth, not performance. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed like an old memory. Teachers hurried through the hallway with paper cups of coffee and expressions already weary before 8 o'clock. Malcolm kept his eyes low, the brim of his cap hiding the sharp intelligence that had guided him through a PhD in education reform. Now he was here to reform something smaller yet harder: the hidden culture of a suburban high school, where race still decided whose mistakes were forgiven and whose were punished. He began in silence, mopping the main hall. The linoleum was scuffed and dull, like everything else in the building that wasn't new or white. Two teachers brushed past him mid-conversation. "Morning," he murmured. Neither looked up. They continued talking, something about kids these days, not respecting authority. One of them, a pale man in his 50s with a coffee stain on his tie, laughed. "I swear the ones from the South Side always drama. It's like they don't come to learn, just to test patience." Malcolm's hands paused around the mop handle. The floor glistened in front of him, his reflection blurred in the streaks. He said nothing. He couldn't. Not yet. He moved slowly through the hallway, passing trophy cases and posters celebrating diversity. "We are one Roosevelt." The irony was sharp. A black student brushed by him, mumbling a quick "sorry, sir." The boy's politeness startled him. "All good, young man," Malcolm replied softly, but the boy was already gone. It struck him that the students, even when rushed, looked him in the eye. The adults didn't. By 10 o'clock he had cleaned 3 hallways, emptied 12 bins, and cataloged more than dirt. He noticed who held doors, who didn't, who said thank you, and who pretended he wasn't there. A social experiment disguised as janitorial work. In the teacher's lounge, the smell of microwaved pasta and stale coffee filled the air. Malcolm wheeled in his cart, moving carefully. He could feel the shift in atmosphere the moment he entered. That faint tension of discomfort, when privilege meets humility and doesn't know where to look. 2 women at the table hushed their talk. One of them smiled too brightly. "Oh, could you maybe come back later? We're about to start a quick department meeting." Malcolm nodded. "Sure thing. I'll be out of the way." He began wiping the counter by the sink. Slow and deliberate, the way you do when you're listening more than cleaning. The conversation resumed, casual at first. Lesson plans, student grades, football games. Then little cracks began to show. "I mean, if they don't want detention, they should learn to speak properly." "Exactly," another voice chimed in. "Every time one of them talks back, it's an attitude. But God forbid we say anything. Suddenly we're the bad guys." Laughter. Light. Effortless. Malcolm's rag stopped mid-circle. His pulse tightened in his throat. They were talking about them. The same them that had followed him since childhood. The same them that was really him. He straightened, glancing around. Posters on the wall said things like "Equity matters" and "Diversity builds strength." The words mocked him now, flat and performative. He turned back to the counter, focusing on a small coffee stain that had already dried, pretending the burn in his chest was just the smell of bleach. "Hey, new guy," a man's voice called out. Malcolm looked up to see a younger teacher leaning against the fridge, smirking. "If you're done wiping down the counters, the trash can's overflowing." "Yes, sir," Malcolm replied quietly. "Appreciate it. What's your name again?" "Malcolm." "Malcolm. What?" He hesitated a fraction too long. "Reeves." The man frowned. "You related to one of the students here?" "There's a Reeve What's that kid's name? Jordan Reeves, right? Freshman? Malcolm's stomach tightened. No relation, he said smoothly. Common name. The teacher nodded, unconvinced. Right. Well, welcome to the circus. The others chuckled. Malcolm smiled faintly, a polite mask. Thanks. When they left, the room fell silent again, except for the humming refrigerator. He sat down on the edge of a chair, hands clasped loosely, and looked around the lounge that would soon be his staff room. He thought of the superintendent's face during his interview 2 weeks ago, the cautious optimism behind every word. We've had some retention issues, she'd said delicately. You have a reputation for connecting with underperforming schools. What she meant was, you're black. You'll understand those kids. You'll be good optics. He'd smiled through it. He always did. Lunchtime brought another rush of noise, sneakers squeaking, laughter echoing through the halls. Malcolm wandered outside the cafeteria, pretending to polish the doorknob. He watched teachers monitor tables, their body language telling stories words never could. One smiled warmly at a group of white students. Another barked at a cluster of black kids for being too loud, though they weren't louder than anyone else. A girl with braids raised her hand timidly. Can I use the bathroom, please? Didn't you just go last period? The teacher snapped. The girl lowered her eyes. No, ma'am. Sit down. Malcolm's throat ached with a quiet fury. The mop in his hand felt heavier than before, as if it carried all the unspoken weight of moments like these. The small humiliations that add up until they choke a child's hope. He knew this pattern too well. He had once been that child, and he had promised himself he would never let another walk through it alone. That afternoon, the sun dipped low across the front windows, throwing long amber streaks down the hallway. Students moved toward buses and carpools, their laughter thinning with distance. The building exhaled, tired, empty, on it. Malcolm returned to the staff lounge for one final sweep, before heading out. Inside, 4 teachers remained, gathered around the table with paper cups and gossip. He kept his head down, collecting wrappers, clearing coffee rings. Did you see the email about the new principal? One asked. Oh yeah, another replied, lowering her voice. Apparently he's from one of those equity-focused districts. You know what that means? More diversity talks, more guilt trips. Please. A third scoffed. I just hope he's not one of those who thinks every decision's about race. We've got enough of that nonsense already. They laughed again. Malcolm's hands stilled on the trash bin. He could hear his own heart beating in the hollow of his chest. The first teacher continued. I heard he's black. Probably means we'll have to be extra careful now. The district's making a point, you know. Malcolm took a slow breath through his nose, forcing his hand to keep moving. He gathered the trash, nodding faintly as if nothing reached him. Well, the second woman said dryly, as long as he doesn't try to act like he knows better than us. We've been doing this for years. The words sank like stones. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They didn't realize he was standing right there. They didn't realize the he they were talking about was the man mopping their floor. He leaned over, pretending to adjust the bin liner. The fourth teacher, older, quiet until now, murmured. Sometimes I think these people forget this is our school. We built this. Malcolm froze. The others nodded. And they'll never understand what it takes to keep it running, the man added, voice dipping low, as if confiding a truth that could only be shared among equals. Not them, not their kind. Something in Malcolm's chest splintered. He straightened, looking at their faces, so casual, so certain. It wasn't hatred burning there, it was comfort, the kind that doesn't question itself because it never has to. He turned away before anyone could see the storm building in his eyes. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to fill the silence. He started toward the door, the trash bag heavy in his grip. Behind him, the laughter started again, lighter this time, almost carefree. Then a voice half-whispered, half-mocking floated across the room. Hey, maybe the new guy can clean up this whole place, huh? Lord knows we could use another one of them in charge of something for once. The others chuckled. Malcolm stopped mid-step. Every nerve in him told him to turn around, to tear off the disguise, to say, I am your new principal. But he didn't, not yet. Instead, he let the words echo in the space between who he was and who they thought he was. The mop leaned against the wall, dripping faintly, like the patience he was losing one drop at a time. He pushed open the lounge door, the air cooler in the hall outside. The faint hum of distant classrooms whispered through the silence. He was about to leave, when one last sentence cut through the laughter inside. quieter, but sharper than the rest. Let's just hope this new principal doesn't try to make everything about race. Otherwise, it's gonna be a long year. Malcolm's breath caught. He turned his head slightly, just enough to see their reflections in the small square window of the door. The older teacher leaned back in his chair, sipping coffee. "Trust me," he said. "You give people like that too much power, and they'll start cleaning more than floors." The words hit him harder than any insult he'd heard in years. Malcolm stood still, the mop handle cold against his palm. His disguise wasn't hiding him from indifference anymore. It was exposing truth, not neglect, not laziness. Something deeper, something darker. He realized in that moment what his experiment was really uncovering. Not carelessness, hate. And the worst part, he hadn't even begun to see how far it reached. Behind the classroom doors, where respect ended and racism began. The next morning began the same way the last one ended, with quiet observation. Dr. Malcolm Reeves pushed his cart down the long second-floor hallway of Roosevelt High, his mop gliding rhythmically against the dull linoleum. He had slept little the night before, haunted by the laughter in the staff lounge. It wasn't the words that kept him awake. It was how casually they had been spoken. How normal hate sounded when people thought it was harmless. He wanted to believe it was just a few rotten voices. But part of him, the part that had lived a lifetime in the skin they dismissed, whispered otherwise. The hallways were busy again. Sneakers scuffing, laughter bouncing between lockers, the smell of cafeteria food already sneaking into the air. The day looked ordinary, which made it dangerous. As Malcolm moved, he studied everything. The walls bore murals about equality and kindness. But inside each classroom, he could feel a colder current, subtle, invisible, but real. He paused outside room 102, English class. The teacher, Miss Porter, a middle-aged woman with a soft cardigan and a hard mouth, was going over vocabulary words. The students read aloud from their desks. "Articulate," she said, writing the word on the board. "Who can use it in a sentence?" A white girl in the front raised her hand. "I'm articulate when I talk to my parents." "Good," Miss Porter said warmly. "Nice use of context." A black boy in the back raised his hand. Like, you gotta be articulate when you talk in an interview, right?" Miss Porter's smile faltered. "Try again. And remember, we don't say gotta in academic settings." The class giggled. The boy shrank a little in his chair. Malcolm's jaw tightened. He could feel the invisible line drawn. One word from her mouth turned a student's natural voice into something unacceptable. She hadn't corrected the white girl for casual phrasing, only him. He kept mopping slowly near the door, pretending not to hear the sting in the boy's silence. By the next period, he found himself outside room 118. History. Mr. Jacobs was teaching about the civil rights movement. The irony wasn't lost on Malcolm. And Dr. King believed in peaceful protest. Jacobs said. That's what made him effective. Unlike some people today who think shouting solves things. Malcolm looked through the window. Most of the students nodded absently. But one girl, a quiet black student with thick glasses, raised her hand. "Sir," she said, "sometimes shouting is the only way people listen." Jacob's face stiffened. "That's not how democracy works. You can't just yell and demand. You have to earn respect." "But didn't Dr. King yell too?" she asked softly. The class fell still. Jacobs gave a thin smile. "We'll move on," he said. "Let's not get political." The girl lowered her hand, embarrassed. Malcolm's stomach twisted. He could almost feel the weight pressing down on that student. The slow suffocation of always being told your truth is too loud. He moved on, mop squeaking, carrying with him the echoes of every silenced voice. By lunchtime, he'd passed a dozen classrooms. The pattern repeated, subtle, consistent, cruel. In room 204, a science teacher ignored the raised hands of darker-skinned students until they stopped raising them. In room 1112, a counselor told a black teen to consider trade school, even though the boy's grades were excellent. It was racism without slurs, discrimination hidden beneath advice and professional tone. He began to understand that Roosevelt High didn't need villains. It thrived on bias too quiet to name. When the bell rang, Malcolm wheeled his cart toward the far wing, the social studies corridor, where he'd heard rumors of the school's strictest teacher, Mr. Graham. The students called him Grim Graham. His class had the highest failure rate and the lowest number of black A's in the entire school. Through the glass panel, Malcolm saw him pacing at the front of the room, his voice slicing through the hum of chatter. "You kids want respect? Start acting like you deserve it, Graham barked. Phones away. No slouching. A black boy near the back straightened, sliding his phone into his pocket. The teacher's gaze locked on him. You think I didn't see that? Out. Now. But I wasn't. Don't talk back. Out. The boy rose, frustration flashing in his eyes. Malcolm watched from the doorway as the teacher's posture stiffened, like he expected defiance, not dialogue. I wasn't on my phone, the boy said quietly. I was checking the time. Then you can check it in detention. The class went silent. The boy stepped out into the hallway, jaw clenched. He brushed past Malcolm without seeing him. Malcolm felt the old ache, the familiar humiliation of being told your truth doesn't matter. He waited until the boy disappeared around the corner, then continued sweeping near the classroom door. Inside, Graham turned back to the class. This is what happens when people think rules don't apply to them. Discipline matters. Malcolm looked at the students, mostly white, nodding automatically. The pattern was there again. He wasn't observing education. He was observing control. He realized something then. The most dangerous kind of racism doesn't shout. It manages. It hides behind policy and procedure and tone. That afternoon, the halls emptied again. Malcolm entered one of the empty classrooms to tidy up. The desks were scattered, doodles marking the surfaces like quiet rebellions. On one desk he noticed a phrase etched with a penknife. We see you even when you don't see us. He ran a thumb over the words, wondering who had carved them. It felt like a message meant for him, or from him. Hey, a voice said behind him. He turned. It was Laura Kemp, the young history teacher from the lounge who had treated him with a hint of kindness the day before. She smiled gently. You work fast, she said. Most janitors take weeks to cover this much ground. Guess I like to stay busy, he replied, cautious. Laura nodded, then glanced around, lowering her voice. I saw you in the hallway earlier, watching Mr. Graham's class. He froze slightly. Just cleaning. I know, she said. But, you saw it, right? The way he talks to certain students? Malcolm studied her expression. There was guilt there, maybe fear too. She was white, but uncomfortable in her own privilege. Aware of it in ways the others refused to be. I've seen a lot, he said quietly. Not just him. Laura sighed. They don't think they're doing anything wrong. That's what's worse. He hesitated. You ever say anything? Once, she whispered. It didn't go well. You learn to choose your battles. Her eyes flicked toward the door as footsteps approached. Listen, she added quickly. If you really want to see how deep this goes. Room 209. After 3. Don't tell anyone. I said that. Then she was gone, leaving the faint smell of chalk dust and risk behind. Malcolm stood still for a moment, absorbing her words. Room 209. The number clung to his thoughts like static. He didn't know it yet, but that room would change everything. The last period of the day arrived. The school was tired, restless. Students slouched, teachers sighed, and the building seemed to exhale its final patience. Malcolm kept moving, pushing his cart near the west wing, near room 209. He could hear faint voices through the door, a teacher speaking sharply, frustration cutting through every syllable. I told you not to talk like that in my class. A pause, then a trembling reply. I was just answering the question. Don't interrupt me, young man. You need to learn to speak properly, if you want people to take you seriously. We don't use that kind of language here. Malcolm froze just outside the door. His heart picked up. The voice, young, familiar, carried a tone he couldn't place yet, but it pulled at something deep inside him. He leaned slightly toward the narrow glass window, peering in. A black boy stood near the back of the class, shoulders squared but eyes uncertain. The teacher, a woman with sharp features and a practiced smile, loomed over him, gesturing toward the rest of the class. Everyone's trying to learn, she said. You can't keep talking ghetto in here. It's disruptive. The word ghetto hit the room like a slap. A few students laughed. Others looked down, pretending not to hear. The boy's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his desk. I was just saying. Enough. The teacher snapped. Sit down before I call security. Malcolm felt something in him break. His hand tightened around the mop handle, until his knuckles whitened. Then he heard the boy's name, soft, defiant, cracked with the weight of every judgment in the room. Jordan Reeves. The world tilted. Malcolm's vision blurred for half a heartbeat. Jordan Reeves. His son. He stared through the window, unable to breathe. His mind raced. The school forms he'd signed, the fake records he'd created to keep his cover. He had placed his own son here, thinking he'd be safe. And now, watching this teacher humiliate him, he understood the full cruelty of what he'd walked into. His heart pounded as Jordan sat down, shoulders stiff, trying not to show the pain. Malcolm's eyes burned. He pressed the mop to the floor, hard enough for the water to splash over his shoes. He had come to test his staff. He had just found his reason to expose them. The meeting no one prepared for. Whispers, bias, and hidden rules. The air in Roosevelt High's faculty lounge felt heavier than the day before, thick with perfume, reheated lunches, and unspoken judgment. Dr. Malcolm Reeves stood at the doorway holding a spray bottle and a rag, his cap pulled low. He had spent the morning replaying what he'd seen in room 209. His own son shrinking beneath a teacher's tone that turned language into a weapon. Now he needed proof, not anger. Proof that the problem wasn't one teacher but a system that had learned to humiliate politely. The staff meeting was already underway when he entered. 12 teachers sat around the rectangular table, coffee cups beside color-coded folders. On the whiteboard, someone had written Equity and Performance Goals Q1. Malcolm forced himself to breathe evenly and moved to the back corner, setting down his card as though invisible. No one questioned why a custodian was cleaning during a meeting. No one ever did. "All right, team," said Vice Principal Howard, a stout man with a salesman's cheerfulness. "District's asking for updates on student conduct, particularly the new attendance policy." He smiled at the room like a politician seeking applause. "Let's hear what's working." A few teachers offered routine comments. Then came the drift, the slow slide from policy to prejudice that Malcolm had begun to recognize like a bad smell. Miss Porter, the English teacher, sighed. "Honestly, the same kids keep causing problems. It's like talking to a wall." Mr. Jacobs from history added, "Half of them don't care, especially the ones from that bus route off Maple Street. They come in late, loud, no respect." Laughter fluttered around the table, the kind that tries to sound harmless. Malcolm's rag moved in small circles over a spotless counter. Each word landed like grit in his ears. Laura Kemp, the young history teacher, spoke carefully. "Some of them have a lot going on outside school. It's not always about attitude." Miss Porter shot her a look. "We all have things going on, Laura. Doesn't mean we bring them into the classroom." Mr. Graham, the same teacher who'd punished Jordan Reeves, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Let's be honest. These kids grow up hearing excuses. If we keep lowering expectations, they'll never learn responsibility." "Exactly," someone muttered. "Accountability's gone soft." Howard nodded, oblivious to the poison laced through their words. "Good points. Still, the district wants us to demonstrate cultural responsiveness. Maybe we can brainstorm ideas." A pause. Chairs squeaked. No one volunteered. Finally, Miss Porter laughed. "I respond culturally every day, by showing up on time." The room erupted in easy chuckles. Malcolm wiped the same spot twice, the rag twisting in his hands. He remembered training teachers like these in other districts, people who could quote diversity slogans, but flinched when faced with the reality of their own bias. What he heard now wasn't shock. It was routine, a language so coded they no longer recognized it as prejudice. Howard scribbled something on the board. "We'll schedule workshop. Moving on, discipline reports." Mr. Graham slid a folder across the table. "Same pattern. I wrote up 6 kids this week. 5 of them from the same neighborhoods. You can draw your own conclusions." Laura shifted in her chair. "Maybe we should look at why that's the pattern." Graham's tone sharpened. "Because they don't listen. Or because we don't listen to them," she said quietly. The room stiffened. Malcolm looked up. Laura's voice trembled but didn't break. He saw in her what he'd once seen in young educators before the system dulled them. Conscience fighting for air. Howard cleared his throat. "All right, let's stay positive." Positive. The word echoed like a slap. The conversation drifted to test scores and achievement gaps. Every phrase was measured, data-driven, sanitized. Yet between the numbers, Malcolm heard the same undertone. They were the problem, we were the solution. He crouched to empty a trash bin near the table. Papers rustled. Incident reports, lesson plans. One labeled student behavior, Jordan R. He froze. The sheet's corner showed a comment in neat cursive. Persistent defiance. Needs attitude adjustment. He slipped it back under the pile before anyone noticed. Howard clapped his hands. "All right, folks. Last item, the new principal's start date. Superintendent says he'll be joining us next week." "Great," Porter said. her smile tight. Another outsider telling us how to do our jobs. Graham chuckled. He'll last a semester. They never last. Someone else added, I heard he's from one of those reform districts, all talk no results. Malcolm's heartbeat quickened. He didn't move, afraid any sound might betray him. Then came the line that hollowed the air. I also heard he's black, Porter said lightly, stirring sugar into her coffee. Finally, representation. Maybe now the janitors will feel seen. More laughter. Someone coughed to hide it. Others smiled behind cups. Laura's face flushed red. That's not funny. Oh, relax, Porter said. It's a joke. It's not, Laura whispered. Not to them. Howard tried to defuse it. Let's keep things professional, folks. But his grin lingered longer than it should. Malcolm's throat burned. He had spent a lifetime teaching dignity. Now he was swallowing humiliation in silence. His disguise had turned him into the proof of their contempt. When the meeting ended, teachers trickled out in clusters, their voices trailing through the corridor. Jokes about students, complaints about policy, plans for happy hour. Malcolm kept wiping, letting them pass. Laura lingered near the doorway, torn between words and silence. She turned back. You shouldn't have to hear that, she murmured. Malcolm met her eyes briefly. It's not the first time. Her brows furrowed as if she sensed something beneath his calm. Still, it's wrong. He nodded, but the conversation ended there. Footsteps approached behind her. Graham entered again, forgetting his phone on the table. He glanced at Malcolm. You missed a spot. Malcolm looked at the pristine counter. Where? Right there, Graham said, pointing to nothing. A smirk. Details matter. Yes, sir, Malcolm replied. When Graham left, Laura exhaled shakily. You handle that better than most. Years of practice, he said. She hesitated. You talk like someone who's done more than clean hallways. He offered a faint smile. Maybe I've just seen enough of them. Her gaze held his for a second longer than courtesy required. Something clicked. Suspicion or respect, he couldn't tell. Then she gathered her papers and left. Malcolm stood alone in the echoing room, the clock ticking like a metronome, counting his patience down to 0. He began collecting the discarded coffee cups, stacking them carefully. Each carried fingerprints, evidence of people who shaped young minds without realizing how much harm could hide in tone. The door creaked again. 2 teachers he hadn't noticed before slipped back inside. Coach Reed from physical education and Mrs. Calloway, the guidance counselor. They spoke in hushed tones, unaware he was behind the cabinet. Howard says the district wants us to track racial data on detentions, Reed said, irritation heavy in his voice. Calloway laughed softly. Good luck. They'll twist it no matter what. If we discipline white kids, we're unfair. If we discipline black kids, we're racist. Exactly, Reed replied. It's a trap. Can't win. Malcolm listened, invisible again, the rag hanging useless in his hand. Calloway continued. You know what? I heard the new principal's already been around, checking on us quietly. Some kind of evaluation trick. Reed snorted. That true? That's what Porter said. One of the subs swears she saw him last week. Tall black guy, maybe 40-something. Apparently he was walking around dressed like maintenance. Malcolm's pulse thundered. The rag slipped from his fingers. Calloway lowered her voice. If that's true, it's sneaky. I don't trust people who test others. Shows a lack of integrity. Reed muttered. If I find out he's been spying, I'll have words. Nobody likes being watched. They gathered their folders and left, conversation fading down the hall. Malcolm stood rooted to the spot. His cover cracked sooner than he'd planned. Someone had seen him, maybe recognized him from the district memo. Word was spreading. He forced his breathing steady, retrieved the fallen rag, and wiped the same clean surface again, slower this time. The line between observer and target was disappearing. Every minute he stayed, the risk grew. But leaving now would mean losing the only chance to expose what this place truly was. The hum of the vending machine filled the silence. He could hear the faint buzz of students outside, unaware that their educators' laughter carried sharper lessons than any textbook. He straightened, glancing at the whiteboard still marked equity and performance goals. The letters gleamed under the fluorescent light like a cruel joke. He took the eraser and wiped the word equity clean, leaving only performance. For the first time that day, he allowed himself a small, bitter smile. Behind him, the hallway door opened again. Malcolm, a voice whispered. He turned. Laura stood there pale, eyes darting. We need to talk. He frowned. About what? She glanced over her shoulder. About you. And about what they're saying. His chest tightened. What are they saying? That you're not who you pretend to be. Her voice trembled. Someone's figured it out. Malcolm's breath stilled. Who? Laura hesitated, fear flickering across her face. Mr. Graham. He told Howard he recognized your name from a district email last month. He stared at her, the room shrinking around them. So the whispers were no longer about those kids. Now they were about him. Thank you, he said quietly. She nodded, eyes wide. Be careful. As she turned to leave, the intercom crackled overhead. Staff reminder, mandatory after-school meeting tomorrow. Attendance required. Malcolm looked up at the speaker, then back at the empty doorway where Laura had stood. The trap was already forming. He gathered his cart, heart pounding with the weight of what was coming. The meeting he'd just cleaned up after wasn't the last one. The real reckoning was still ahead, and this time he wouldn't be invisible. Because someone had spoken his name. The one ally who looked twice. A teacher who saw the man, not the uniform. The rest of that afternoon moved in slow motion. The hallways smelled of chalk and anxiety. Students filed out in waves, the echoes of lockers and laughter fading, until the only sounds left were footsteps and fluorescent hum. Dr. Malcolm Reeves wheeled his cleaning cart down the deserted corridor, his mind replaying the whisper that had changed everything. Someone knows who you really are. He had spent 2 days watching Prejudice wear a professional smile, and now his cover was unraveling. He could almost feel the shift in the air when he passed teachers in the hall. Their glances slightly longer, their conversations pausing a beat too late. Someone had told them a secret they weren't supposed to know. Still, he kept moving, the mop his disguise and his shield. The plan was simple now. Stay silent. Keep observing. Find the truth before the truth found him. He stopped outside room 206, where Laura Kemp was gathering papers from her desk. The door was open, and her voice floated softly through the room as she spoke to a student lingering by the window. Don't worry about the essay grade, she said. It's not about the number, it's about your voice. The student smiled faintly, nodded, and left. Malcolm started to move on, but Laura's eyes caught his through the open doorway. She smiled, a small unguarded smile that didn't carry the pity or dismissal he'd seen in others. You're working late again, she said, leaning against the doorframe. He shrugged. Seems like there's always more floor than time. Laura tilted her head, studying him. You say that like a philosopher, not a janitor. Malcolm froze. There it was again, that perception she couldn't quite name. He tried to mask it with humor. You can learn a lot from floors. They show you what everyone steps on. She laughed softly. I like that. Then her gaze softened. They've been talking about you, you know. I figured. I didn't say I agreed with them. He met her eyes. There was something in her tone, defiance, laced with fear. She wasn't like the others, but she was still trapped in the same machinery. What are they saying? He asked quietly. That you ask too many questions for a janitor, she said. That you listen too closely. Graham's been stirring it. Malcolm exhaled. He'd notice anyone who sees too much. Laura hesitated. He thinks you're connected to the district somehow. I didn't tell him otherwise. Thank you, he said. His voice carried a weight she didn't understand yet. She folded her arms, glancing around the empty hallway. You shouldn't be here alone after hours. It's not safe. I've been in worse places, he replied. You'd be surprised what people say when they think you're invisible. Her eyes flickered, part curiosity, part unease. Invisible, she repeated, as if testing the word. That's exactly how they treat you. But you don't act invisible. Malcolm smiled faintly. Maybe I forgot how. For a long moment, silence filled the space between them. Not awkward, but alive, charged with recognition neither could name. Then Laura looked down at her hands, then back up. You saw what happened in room 209, didn't you? The question hit him like a sudden wind. Why do you ask? I saw your face afterward, she said. You looked like someone watching something they wish they could stop. He didn't answer. His jaw tightened, and that told her everything. Laura's expression changed. Empathy, then something fiercer. That teacher shouldn't be in a classroom. Malcolm nodded slowly. I know. Then why aren't you reporting it? He looked away, eyes tracing the reflection of ceiling lights in the polished floor. Because if I do it the wrong way, they'll bury it. They'll bury him. And they'll bury me. Laura's voice lowered. Him? Malcolm hesitated. The student she humiliated. He's my son. She stared at him, eyes wide, breath caught. Your son? Yes, he said quietly. Jordan Reeves, freshman. Smart, patient. He doesn't deserve what this school calls discipline. Laura stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. You're the new principal. He didn't confirm it, but the silence between them did. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, torn between shock and understanding. My God, you're risking everything. Malcolm met her gaze. I already lost enough pretending the system fixes itself. For a moment she said nothing. Then, softly, you're not the only one who's been scared to speak up. He looked at her again. This woman standing in a storm she hadn't caused, but refused to ignore. He realized she wasn't just curious. She was tired. Tired of watching injustice dressed in professionalism. Tired of silence. Then maybe we stop being scared, he said. A small smile broke through her nerves. You sound like someone giving a speech? He laughed quietly. Old habit. She hesitated again, then reached into her folder and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She pressed it into his hand. Read this after 3 o'clock, she whispered, and don't let anyone see you with it. He frowned. What is it? Something you need to see. Before he could respond, footsteps echoed from the far hall. Laura straightened quickly, masking her expression. Mr. Graham's voice rang out. Kemp, you heading out or planning to redecorate the building? Laura called back. Just finishing up, Mr. Graham. He appeared around the corner, his eyes sliding from her to Malcolm. Figures. Still here, huh? Malcolm kept his tone even. Just cleaning. Graham smirked. Yeah, I bet. Be careful wandering after hours. Some people might get the wrong idea. Laura's jaw tightened. He's just doing his job. Graham shrugged. Sure. Whatever you say, Laura. He turned, muttering something under his breath that neither of them could quite catch. But the tone said enough. When he disappeared down the hall, Laura exhaled. See? That's what I mean. Fear runs this place. Malcolm unfolded the note slightly, seeing only the first few words before refolding it. Room 209. After 3 p.m., he glanced up. What's in that room? Her expression hardened. The truth. The clock in the hallway ticked past 2:45. The school was nearly empty now, just echoes of lockers closing, the janitor's cartwheels squeaking against tile. Malcolm waited near the vending machines, his heart thudding quietly. Every instinct told him to walk away. If Laura had guessed wrong, if someone else had followed her, his cover would shatter. But curiosity, and the face of his son, kept him rooted. At exactly 3, the final bell of the day sounded. The building exhaled its last wave of chatter, then silence. He moved toward room 209, the same classroom where he had watched Jordan shrink under Miss Dwyer's cutting words. The door was slightly ajar. The air smelled of dry erase markers and disinfectant. He stepped inside. The desks were empty, papers still scattered from the last class. For a moment he thought the room was deserted, until he heard a voice behind him. I didn't think you'd come. Laura stood by the window holding a small USB drive between her fingers. Sunlight glinted off the metal. What is that? He asked. Footage, she said. Security feed. I copied it before they could erase it. The camera in this room isn't just for show. It caught everything. What she said to your son. The laughter from the students. All of it. Malcolm stared at the drive. You could lose your job. So could you, she said simply. But maybe someone needs to. He took the drive carefully, as if it were something sacred. Why are you helping me? Laura's eyes glistened. Because I saw myself in that boy's face. Wanting to speak but knowing no one would listen. A long silence stretched between them. Outside, a storm was gathering. Thunder low and distant. You can't tell anyone yet, he said finally. Not until I know who's protecting her. Laura nodded. Then you should start with the staff meeting tomorrow. They're planning something. He looked up sharply. What kind of something? Howard sent an email. She said. Closed meeting. Topic unspecified. But Graham was smiling about it. Malcolm pocketed the USB. They're closing in. Then you need to be ready, she said. I can't protect you if they find out what I gave you. He met her eyes again. You already did enough. She hesitated, as if wanting to say more, then reached for another sheet of paper on her desk. She scribbled a line, folded it, and handed it to him. This is for later, she said. You'll understand why. He slipped it into his pocket. Thank you, Laura. As he turned to leave, she whispered, Be careful, Dr. Reeves. The title doctor hung in the air between them like a confession. She knew exactly who he was. Now, he looked back once more. Ute. Outside the window, lightning flashed against the clouds, washing the hallway in silver. Malcolm moved quickly down the corridor, the note burning in his pocket like a warning. When he reached the janitor's closet, he unfolded it under the buzzing light. The handwriting was neat, urgent. You need to see room 209 after 3 p.m. He stared at the words, realizing it wasn't the first note she had written. It was the same one, rewritten, reinforced, as if she feared he hadn't listened. But she'd already given him the drive. So why leave another message? Then, beneath the line, he noticed smaller text he hadn't seen before. Faint pencil marks at the bottom corner. They're watching me. A chill crept up his spine. He folded the paper and looked toward the hallway. At the far end, silhouetted against the flickering exit sign, stood someone, still silent, watching. Malcolm's breath hitched. The figure turned away and vanished before he could move. He was no longer just undercover. He was being hunted. Room 209, where the line between ignorance and abuse blurred. The hallway outside room 209 was too quiet for mid-afternoon. A storm pressed against the windows, dulling the light until everything looked filmed through smoke. Dr. Malcolm Reeves pushed his cart forward, the wheels whispering over the tile. His palms were damp, his mind louder than the thunder building in the distance. He had promised himself he wouldn't come back to this room. Not yet, not until he'd planned his next move. But Laura's warning note, "They're watching me," beat in his pocket like a pulse. Whatever she had feared was rooted here, in this classroom. He paused at the door. Inside a voice rose, sharp, clipped, rehearsed. Hair is not an excuse for distraction, Maya. You've been told this before. Malcolm's breath caught. The lesson hadn't ended. The students were still here. He eased the door open a few inches. From that narrow slit he saw Ms. Dwyer, the same teacher who had humiliated his son, pacing at the front of the room. Her posture was rigid, her blonde hair pulled tight, her authority sharper than any weapon. At the back sat Maya Thompson, a black sophomore with deep brown skin and bright eyes dulled by exhaustion. Her curls framed her face like defiance itself. A rubber band dangled from her fingers. "I can't tie it back any tighter," she said, voice trembling. "You'll do as I said," Dwyer snapped. "You know the rules. No hair covering your eyes. It's a safety hazard." "It's not covering my eyes." Maya's tone was soft, reasoning, dangerous in a room that punished reason. Dwyer's smile thinned. "Then it must be attitude." A few students shifted uneasily. One boy snickered. The teacher's voice dropped an octave, the way people speak when they want their cruelty to sound like order. "You people think everything is about race. It's not. It's about respect." Malcolm's stomach turned. "You people." The phrase hung in the air like smoke from a match that wouldn't go out. Maya's hands shook as she gathered her curls, twisting them into a knot. The rubber band snapped against her scalp with a small, humiliating pop. She winced but said nothing. Dwyer stepped closer. "There. Now you look more appropriate. Sit up straight." Malcolm's knuckles whitened around the handle of his cart. The instinct to storm in was almost unbearable. But the disguise chained him. One wrong move, and weeks of observation would vanish. Under a single accusation, angry black man. So he stayed in the doorway's shadow, forcing his breath to steady. Dwyer turned to the whiteboard, continuing her lecture as if nothing had happened. "We were discussing the concept of civility, how society maintains order when everyone follows the same rules." She underlined the word civility in thick blue marker. Malcolm looked at the students. A few exchanged looks, guilt, confusion, silence. They'd seen this before. They knew when to keep their heads down. "Now," Dwyer said, "who can define it?" A hand went up. A white girl near the front. "It means being polite." "Excellent," Dwyer beamed. "And when people aren't polite, they get consequences," another answered quickly. "Exactly." Her eyes flicked toward Maya. "Consequences." The word struck like a verdict. When the bell rang, chairs scraped and chatter filled the room. But Maya didn't move. She stared at her desk, fingers pressed against the welt on her scalp. Dwyer collected papers, pretending not to see. Malcolm stepped back from the door as students filed out. A few murmured apologies to Maya, under their breath. Others looked away. The quiet complicity of teenagers learning from the adults who taught them indifference. When the last of them disappeared down the hall, Malcolm slipped inside. Dwyer looked up, startled. "Oh, didn't see you there. Custodial work now?" He nodded slowly. Just cleaning, ma'am. She eyed him. Make it quick. I have another class coming in. He moved toward the window, wiping an already clean pane. Rough day, he asked. She gave a short laugh. You could say that. Some of these kids, they push limits. Maybe they're just trying to be seen. He said. Dwyer paused, studying him. You're new. Yes, ma'am. What's your name again? Malcolm. Malcolm. She frowned, searching memory. Have we met before? I don't think so. Well, she said, turning back to her desk. I'm sure you'll fit right in if you work hard and stay out of trouble. This place doesn't tolerate laziness. He wiped the same window twice. That's so? Absolutely. Her tone brightened, unaware of the blade under his words. People mistake kindness for weakness. These kids, especially the ones from certain backgrounds, they need firmness, structure. He forced a neutral nod. Structure's important. You understand. She smiled approvingly, missing the irony completely. Where are you from, Malcolm? Downstairs. She tilted her head. You speak well, not what I expected. He froze. She noticed his silence and hurried on. I mean, for a janitor, most of the staff don't have that diction. He turned slowly, letting his eyes meet hers. Guess words are just another kind of polish. The air between them cooled. She busied herself with a stack of folders. Anyway, if you're done, I need the room cleared. I have tutoring. Of course, he said. But before I go, mind if I ask a question? She glanced up, wary. Depends on what kind. He gestured toward the rows of desks. When you talk about civility, what does that mean to you? Her expression softened, mistaking curiosity for admiration. It means discipline. Everyone equal under the same rules. No special treatment. No playing the victim. Even if the rules hurt some more than others. That's not the rule's fault, she said briskly. It's their attitude. He studied her face. The self-assurance. The unexamined confidence. She believed every word. He said quietly, attitude or identity. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, he replied. Just curious. Something flickered in her gaze. A hint of suspicion. You sound educated. He shrugged. You pick things up on the job. She laughed nervously. Well, don't pick up gossip. People here love to twist stories. I'll keep that in mind. He turned back to his cart, but as he reached for the door handle, a sound stopped him. A soft, muffled sob. Maya was still there. He hadn't noticed her hiding behind the supply cabinet near the back. Dwyer sighed. Maya, honestly, it's not that serious. It hurts, the girl whispered. That's because you're oversensitive. Life's not going to adjust for your feelings. Malcolm's chest tightened. The words were surgical, cutting dignity away. Piece by piece, he wanted to step in, to tear off the mask, but the mission chained him again. He forced himself to speak in character. Ma'am, he said quietly, you want me to give her a moment? I can clean later. Dwyer looked at him as if he'd spoken out of turn. No, she'll leave now, Maya out. The girl stood slowly, wiping her face. As she passed, Dwyer muttered, if you spent less time on your hair and more on homework, we wouldn't have these talks. Maya flinched but kept walking. When she reached the door, Malcolm whispered, You're okay. She looked up, startled by the kindness in a stranger's voice, and nodded faintly before slipping away. Dwyer folded her arms. You people always have something to say. The words landed like a slap. Malcolm straightened. You people. I meant staff, she said quickly. Maintenance. Don't take things personally. He looked at her, voice even. It's hard not to. Their eyes locked for a long, brittle second. The storm outside cracked open, thunder rolling through the glass. For the first time she looked unsure. He turned to leave. Wait, she said suddenly. Why were you standing outside my room earlier? I saw your reflection in the window. He froze. Her tone sharpened. Were you listening? I clean the halls, he said slowly. Windows, floors, whatever they tell me. She stepped closer. That's not what I asked. Malcolm met her gaze, calm, masking fury. You think I have time to spot? I think people talk, she said. And if you're smart, you'll remember where you stand here. He smiled faintly, not kindly. Oh, I remember. She held his stare a moment longer, then turned back to her desk. Good, because around here people who don't know their place don't last. Malcolm pushed the cart into the hallway, heart pounding. Behind him the classroom door clicked shut, But the echo stayed. The rain began in earnest, tapping against the windows like restless fingers. Halfway down the corridor he stopped, leaning against the wall. The smell of ammonia filled his lungs. He thought of Jordan, of Maya, of every student who had been taught that dignity was optional. He whispered to himself, "Not anymore." Then he heard it, the sound of footsteps behind him. Slow, deliberate. He turned. Miss Dwyer stood in the doorway, face pale but eyes hard. "I knew it," she said. "You were listening." He stayed silent. "I don't know who you think you are," she hissed, "but you have no right to question my class. I'm reporting this to the office." He forced a small nod. "Do what you need to, ma'am." She studied him for another moment. Then her expression changed. Uncertain, calculating. "What's your last name again?" He hesitated. "Reeves." Recognition flickered. "Reeves," she repeated slowly. "Like that kid." The words hung unfinished. Malcolm's pulse thundered in his ears. The storm crashed outside, a white flash illuminating her face as comprehension dawned. Her eyes narrowed. "You," she said softly, almost in awe. "You're not a janitor." He didn't answer. Lightning split the sky. Thunder roared through the corridor. For the first time, she looked afraid. Caught. The janitor who knew too much. The storm outside pressed harder against the glass, lightning tracing veins of white through the sky. Dr. Malcolm Reeves stood frozen in the hallway, mop still dripping onto the tile. Across from him, Miss Dwyer's face had gone pale, her eyes narrowing with the slow dawning understanding of someone realizing they had crossed a line too deep to retrace. "You're not a janitor," she said again, voice tightening. Silence filled the corridor. Malcolm didn't move. Dwyer took a step closer, lowering her tone. "Who are you?" He drew a breath that came out steady, though every muscle in his body screamed to leave. "Just someone trying to clean up." Her lips curved in a thin, humorless smile. "Don't play smart. I saw the way you watch. You're no maintenance help." He said nothing. "Answer me," she snapped, the authority that had humiliated students now turning defensive. "What game are you playing?" "I'm not playing anything," he replied. "But maybe that's the problem around here. Too many people treat teaching like a game they already won." She blinked, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" He didn't answer. He simply picked up his mop, turned and started toward his cart. "Don't walk away from me." Her heels clicked on the floor as she followed. "You were spying, weren't you? Trying to catch me on something?" He kept moving. The cart wheels squeaked, echoing down the empty hull. "You have no right to listen to my classes," she hissed. "No right to judge how I handle my students." "I didn't judge," Malcolm said without looking back. "I just..." "Then you can unsee it," she shot back. "Or I'll make sure you regret it." He stopped, slowly turned. "Is that a threat, Miss Dwyer?" "It's a warning," she said. "If you think anyone's going to take your word over mine, you don't understand how this place works." Her words stung with an honesty that chilled him. He had built a career on understanding systems, but never from beneath them. For the first time in years, he stood on the powerless side of one. "Go ahead," she said, folding her arms. "Run to whoever you answer to. Tell them I raised my voice. Tell them I hurt your feelings. I've seen men like you before, always trying to expose something that isn't there." He studied her face. Calm, composed, dangerous. A woman who would weaponize civility the same way others used fists. "Maybe you're right," he said finally. "Maybe there's nothing here to expose." The calmness in his voice unnerved her more than anger would have. "Then we understand each other," she said quickly. He nodded once, expression unreadable. "Perfectly." Then he left her standing in the corridor. That night, the rain refused to stop. Malcolm drove home in silence, windshield wipers carving rhythmic lines across the glass. The world outside blurred, but the scenes replayed in perfect focus. Dwyer's sneer, Maya's humiliation, the laughter in the staff lounge, his son's shrinking shoulders. He pulled into his driveway, killed the engine, and sat there for a long time. The house lights glowed faintly behind curtains, the familiar warmth of family waiting inside. He couldn't go in yet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Laura's USB drive. The small silver stick reflected the dashboard light. Proof. Evidence. Justice in digital form. But justice could ruin everything. The district, his credibility. Maybe even his son's peace. The rain drummed harder. He whispered to himself, what kind of father hides behind a mop? When he finally stepped inside, The smell of dinner had faded to cold air and silence. Jordan sat at the kitchen table, head bent over homework. His hair was still tied back too tight. "Hey," Malcolm said softly. Jordan didn't look up. "Hey, you eat?" "Yeah." Malcolm hesitated. "How was school?" A shrug. "Fine." He wanted to ask, did she say anything else? But he couldn't, not without revealing he had been there. He poured himself a glass of water instead. Jordan's pencil scratched against paper. Finally he said, "Dad, why do teachers always think we're mad when we talk normal?" Malcolm's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" "She said I sound aggressive," Jordan said, not looking up. "I wasn't even mad. I was just talking. But she said it again today. So I stopped." Malcolm swallowed hard. "You shouldn't have to stop being yourself." Jordan shrugged again. "Doesn't matter. Nobody listens anyway." Malcolm looked at him, the quiet resignation in his tone, the seed of cynicism planted too young, and felt something break inside. He had spent years fighting racism, in boardrooms and policy meetings, thinking progress meant percentages. But here, under his own roof, it had reached his son. After Jordan went to bed, Malcolm sat in the dark living room replaying every moment from the last 2 days. The patterns were clear now. Unspoken rules, whispered biases, a hierarchy that rewarded blindness. The school wasn't failing from neglect. It was poisoned from within, and he had walked straight into its bloodstream. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Heard you've been asking questions. Careful who you trust." He stared at the screen, pulse quickening. He typed back, "Who is this?" No response. The rain thudded heavier against the window, drowning out the sound of his heartbeat. By morning, the sky had cleared, but the air felt heavier than ever. Malcolm arrived at the school early, still wearing the janitor's uniform. He wasn't ready to end the act yet. Not until he understood who had sent that message. The building was quiet, the kind of silence that hums before chaos. He unlocked the supply closet, stored the mop, and straightened the cap on his head. The mask still fit, even if it was crumbling underneath. As he made his way down the hallway, Laura appeared from the main office, looking pale and tense. "You shouldn't be here this early," she whispered. "Neither should you," he said. She glanced around to make sure they were alone. Dwyer filed a complaint, said you were eavesdropping, and making her feel unsafe. He almost laughed at the absurdity. "Unsafe?" "She told Howard she caught you spying through the door." Malcolm exhaled through his nose. "Of course she did." Laura lowered her voice further. "They're planning a meeting about it. But that's not all." He looked at her sharply. "What else?" "She mentioned your name. Reeves. Said it sounded familiar." Howard checked the district roster. "He found your file." Malcolm's stomach dropped. "He knows." "Not officially," she said quickly. "He's guessing, but you need to be careful. If he confirms who you are, they'll spin this. They'll say you infiltrated the school, under false pretenses. It'll become about you, not them." He ran a hand over his face. "It already is." Laura stepped closer. "You still have the footage?" "Yes." "Then you have leverage. Use it." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "If I use it wrong, the kids pay the price." "They're already paying," she said softly. Before he could answer, footsteps echoed from down the hall. Laura stepped back. Vice Principal Howard appeared, smiling too wide. "Morning, folks." "Morning," Laura said quickly. Howard's gaze lingered on Malcolm. "You're the new maintenance guy, right?" "Malcolm. Reeves?" "That's right." Howard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Funny coincidence. We've got a new principal coming soon with the same name. Small world, huh?" Malcolm kept his tone neutral. "Guess so." "Well," Howard said, still watching him, "let's make sure the place is spotless. Big changes ahead." When he finally walked away, Laura exhaled shakily. "He's baiting you." "I know. What are you going to do?" He picked up the mop again. "My job." She shook her head. "You can't keep pretending." He gave a small, tired smile. "Pretending is the only way I can still see the truth." That afternoon, the staff lounge buzzed with whispered gossip. Malcolm moved quietly between tables, emptying bins. He caught fragments of conversation. His name, janitor, complaint, inappropriate questions. The narrative was forming, and he could feel the walls closing. As he wiped a counter, Miss Dwyer entered, voice sharp enough to slice through chatter. "I just hope the district handles it properly. We need to feel safe at work." Howard nodded solemnly. We take all reports seriously. Malcolm kept his back turned, pretending not to hear. Laura, sitting near the back, stared into her coffee, her knuckles white. Howard continued, "Anonymous complaints can be tricky, but this one's pretty detailed." Dwyer smiled. "Anonymous? I didn't realize it was anonymous." Howard shrugged. "We all protect ourselves, don't we?" The teachers murmured agreement. Malcolm's chest tightened. They were already rewriting the story, layering bureaucracy over bias. He finished cleaning, nodded politely to no one in particular, and left the room. That night he couldn't sleep. The rain had returned, softer now, tapping the roof like a metronome. He sat at his desk in the dim light, laptop open, USB drive glowing faintly in the port. He hovered over the video file. One click, and everything could change. He pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Miss Dwyer's voice filled the room, cold and commanding. "Hair is not an excuse for distraction." Maya's small, trembling voice followed. "It's not covering my eyes." Then the snap of the rubber band, the laughter. Malcolm leaned back, jaw clenched. Proof. Undeniable. But weaponizing it would make him the story, not the problem. He needed a strategy, not a scandal. He closed the laptop, rested his hands on his face, and whispered, "There has to be another way." He didn't see the envelope slipped under his front door until morning light cut through the blinds. He picked it up, plain white, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in neat black font. "You should have stayed in your office, Principal Reeves." His breath stopped. They knew. The staff who smiled in his face, racism in polite clothing. The corridor hummed with fluorescent light, as Dr. Malcolm Reeves followed Vice Principal Howard toward the administrative wing. Their footsteps echoed against the tile, the rhythm of civility that hid tension underneath. Howard's voice was casual, almost friendly, but Malcolm recognized the performative ease of a man rehearsing his lines. "Appreciate you making time," Howard said, leading him into the conference room. "District's breathing down our necks about equity metrics. But hey, progress takes patience, right?" "Patience has never been the issue," Malcolm replied quietly. Howard's grin tightened. "Of course. I just mean, these things move slow. Don't want to upset the balance too fast." Malcolm sat across the table, fingers steepled. Balance usually means keeping power where it's always been. Howard chuckled awkwardly. "You're direct. I like that." "No, you don't," Malcolm thought. Howard slid a folder across the table. "These are the reports we send to the district: student demographics, disciplinary actions, staffing breakdown. You'll see we're compliant." "Compliant," Malcolm repeated. "That's a low bar." Howard's eyes flicked up. "I'm sure you'll raise it." Malcolm opened the folder. The numbers told their own story. 70% of detentions given to black students, 20% to Latino, the rest divided among everyone else. Achievement gaps masked behind test averages. Compliance had been the school's camouflage for decades. He closed the folder. "Thank you." Howard stood. "Well, I'll let you get settled." And for what it's worth, he added with a practiced smile, "the staff really respects you." Malcolm looked up. "They fear exposure, not respect." Howard's grin didn't falter. "Either way, it keeps order." When he left, the silence felt heavier than before. By the next morning, the rumor mill was turning at full speed. Some teachers whispered that Dr. Reeves was an activist disguised as an educator. Others said he'd been planted by the district to clean house. The irony wasn't lost on him. At 8:30 a.m., he sent an all-staff email. Subject: faculty assembly. Mandatory attendance. Time: 3:15 p.m. Location: auditorium. Agenda: school culture and vision. The subject line alone was enough to set nerves buzzing. By noon, the lounge was a hive of speculation. When the bell rang that afternoon, the auditorium filled slowly. Teachers filed in with forced smiles and cautious eyes. Howard stood near the stage, clipboard in hand, performing managerial calm. Laura sat quietly in the third row, her hands folded, anxiety and hope colliding across her face. Malcolm took the stage without notes. The microphone crackled once, then steadied. "Good afternoon," he began. "I won't take much of your time, but I will take your attention." The murmur died. He let his gaze sweep the room. "When I first arrived, I didn't walk in through this stage door. I walked in through the side entrance, the one most of you never notice unless something spills." A faint shift rippled through the audience. "I saw Roosevelt High from the ground up," he continued. The way students are spoken to, the way assumptions shape discipline, the way equity posters hang in hallways where equity doesn't live. Howard cleared his throat softly. Malcolm ignored him. I learned a lot as your janitor, he said plainly. More than I might have as your principal. The sentence landed like a dropped stone. Teachers exchanged startled looks. A few gasped quietly. Dwyer's face drained of color. Yes, he said, answering the silence. I was here, cleaning floors, emptying your bins, listening, watching. And what I saw broke me. He paused just long enough for the discomfort to spread. I saw students punished for tone, not behavior. I saw gifted black children called disruptive. I saw teachers who believed they were colorblind, use that blindness to justify ignorance. And I heard laughter that wasn't funny. The air thickened. Laura's eyes glistened, but others stiffened, arms crossed in silent defense. I'm not here to shame anyone, Malcolm said, but I am here to rebuild this school from the foundation up. He clicked the remote. The projector lit the wall behind him. Roosevelt High Equity Reform Initiative. Starting this semester, he continued, we'll launch 3 changes. He raised a finger. First, mandatory diversity, ethics and cultural competency training for all faculty. Not a slideshow, not a checkbox. Real sessions led by professionals outside this district. A murmur rose. Howard shifted uneasily. Second, a new accountability system. Every disciplinary action will be reviewed by a board, including administration, teachers, and 2 student representatives. Bias is often invisible until someone else looks at it. A louder rustle now. Porter leaned toward Graham, whispering, students reviewing teachers. He's out of his mind. Malcolm continued, unflinching. And third, the creation of a student equity board. Elected by peers. Their job will be to bring concerns directly to administration, without fear. They'll have a seat at our monthly meetings. That sentence set the room ablaze. Hands shot up, voices overlapped. This isn't a democracy. We're trained professionals. You're undermining authority. This is too political. Malcolm waited until the noise exhausted itself. Politics, he said evenly, is what happens when power decides who gets to be heard. Education is supposed to be what happens when everyone does. A quiet spread across the room. Dwyer's voice broke the stillness. You're implying we're racist. He looked at her directly. I'm implying we can do better. Her jaw clenched. You don't know what it's like managing classrooms of 30 kids. Some of us have been here 20 years. And some of you stopped growing 19 years ago, he said softly. The gasp that followed was sharp. Even Howard's mask slipped for a second. Malcolm straightened. I understand change is uncomfortable, but comfort has never been the goal of education. Truth is, he closed the laptop. That's all for now. Expect official guidelines in your inbox tomorrow. Dismissed. No applause. Just silence and the shuffle of feet. When the auditorium cleared, Howard approached, forcing a smile. Bold speech. Might need some polishing before the district hears about it. It wasn't for the district, Malcolm said. It was for the mirror. Howard tilted his head, meaning, everyone needs to see themselves clearly before they can fix what's broken. Howard chuckled lightly, then leaned in. Just make sure they don't see too much, Dr. Reeves. People get defensive when they feel accused. They should, Malcolm said. Guilt's the first step to responsibility. Howard's smile thinned. I'll draft a summary of today's meeting. For transparency. I'm sure you will. They parted with polite nods that felt more like a duel than courtesy. By evening, the tension was everywhere. The staff group chat buzzed with coded outrage. Words like overreach, agenda, and witch hunt filled the thread. One message, anonymous, read, if he wants a war, he'll get one. Malcolm sat alone in his office, the overhead light dim. Through the window he could see the janitorial staff, finishing their shifts, mops moving methodically down the halls he once walked unseen. He envied their simplicity, the freedom of labor without politics. Laura knocked softly and stepped inside. You okay? He smiled faintly. Define okay. She sat across from him. You knew they'd push back. I counted on it. But not all of them are against you, she said. Some are scared. Scared of losing comfort, he said. Or scared of change. Maybe both. He leaned back. That's the thing about systemic rot. It grows in silence. The moment you name it, everyone hears an accusation. She hesitated. You made an impact today, even if they won't admit it. Impact isn't the same as progress. Sometimes, it's the beginning of it, she said quietly. He smiled. You always sound like hope. And you sound like someone carrying too much. I've carried worse. She looked down, then back at him. Be careful. They'll come for you differently now. Not with insults, but with smiles. I know, he said. That's how power survives. She left without another word. Later that night, he stayed in the office long after everyone had gone. Papers scattered across his desk, reports open, his reflection faint in the window glass. He should have gone home, but something in him needed the stillness, to measure the cost of what he'd just done. He looked at the mop leaning in the corner, the same one he'd used his first day undercover. It reminded him that power meant nothing if it couldn't touch the ground. A sound interrupted his thoughts, a faint rustle at the door. He stood, walked over, and saw an envelope slide through the narrow gap under the frame. It landed silently at his feet. He hesitated before picking it up. No name, no handwriting. Just a single sheet inside, typed in block letters. Go back to cleaning floors where you belong. He read it twice, then set it down on his desk. For a long time he just stared at it. The words were simple, but their poison was precise, a reminder that some minds would never separate the janitor from the man. He looked out the window again, the city lights flickering in the distance, and whispered to himself, I was cleaning more than floors. Behind him, the office clock ticked softly, marking the seconds until the next confrontation he couldn't avoid. The backlash, when change feels like threat. The corridor hummed with fluorescent light, as Dr. Malcolm Reeves followed Vice Principal Howard toward the administrative wing. Their footsteps echoed against the tile, the rhythm of civility that hid tension underneath. Howard's voice was casual, almost friendly, but Malcolm recognized the performative ease of a man rehearsing his lines. Appreciate you making time, Howard said, leading him into the conference room. District's breathing down our necks about equity metrics. But hey, progress takes patience, right? Patience has never been the issue. Malcolm replied quietly. Howard's grin tightened. Of course. I just mean, these things move slow. Don't want to upset the balance too fast. Malcolm sat across the table, fingers steepled. Balance usually means keeping power where it's always been. Howard chuckled awkwardly. You're direct. I like that. No, you don't, Malcolm thought. Howard slid a folder across the table. These are the reports we send to the district: student demographics, disciplinary actions, staffing breakdown. You'll see we're compliant. Compliant, Malcolm repeated. That's a low bar. Howard's eyes flicked up. I'm sure you'll raise it. Malcolm opened the folder. The numbers told their own story. 70% of detentions given to black students, 20% to Latino, the rest divided among everyone else. Achievement gaps masked behind test averages. Compliance had been the school's camouflage for decades. He closed the folder. Thank you. Howard stood. Well, I'll let you get settled. And for what it's worth, he added with a practiced smile. The staff really respects you. Malcolm looked up. They fear exposure, not respect. Howard's grin didn't falter. Either way, it keeps order. When he left, the silence felt heavier than before. By the next morning, the rumor mill was turning at full speed. Some teachers whispered that Dr. Reeves was an activist, disguised as an educator. Others said he'd been planted by the district to clean house. The irony wasn't lost on him. At 8:30 a.m. he sent an all-staff email. Subject: faculty assembly. Mandatory attendance. Time: 3:15 p.m. Location: auditorium. Agenda: school culture and vision. The subject line alone was enough to set nerves buzzing. By noon, the lounge was a hive of speculation. When the bell rang that afternoon, the auditorium filled slowly. Teachers filed in with forced smiles and cautious eyes. Howard stood near the stage, clipboard in hand, performing managerial calm. Laura sat quietly in the third row, her hands folded, anxiety and hope colliding across her face. Malcolm took the stage without notes. The microphone crackled once, then steadied. Good afternoon, he began. I won't take much of your time, but I will take your attention. The murmur died. He let his gaze sweep the room. When I first arrived, I didn't walk in through this stage door. I walked in through the side entrance, the one most of you never notice unless something spills. A faint shift rippled through the audience. I saw Roosevelt High from the ground up. He continued. The way students are spoken to, the way assumptions shape discipline, the way equity posters hang in hallways where equity doesn't live. Howard cleared his throat softly. Malcolm ignored him. I learned a lot as your janitor, he said plainly. More than I might have as your principal. The sentence landed like a dropped stone. Teachers exchanged startled looks. A few gasped quietly. Dwyer's face drained of color. Yes, he said, answering the silence. I was here, cleaning floors, emptying your bins, listening, watching. And what I saw broke me. He paused just long enough for the discomfort to spread. I saw students punished for tone, not behavior. I saw gifted black children called disruptive. I saw teachers who believed they were colorblind use that blindness to justify ignorance. And I heard laughter that wasn't funny. The air thickened. Laura's eyes glistened, but others stiffened, arms crossed in silent defense. I'm not here to shame anyone, Malcolm said. But I am here to rebuild this school from the foundation up. He clicked the remote. The projector lit the wall behind him. Roosevelt High, Equity Reform Initiative. Starting this semester, he continued, we'll launch 3 changes. He raised a finger. First, mandatory diversity, ethics and cultural competency training for all faculty. Not a slideshow, not a checkbox. Real sessions, led by professionals outside this district. A murmur rose. Howard shifted uneasily. Second, a new accountability system. Every disciplinary action will be reviewed by a board including administration, teachers, and 2 student representatives. Bias is often invisible until someone else looks at it. A louder rustle now. Porter leaned toward Graham, whispering, students reviewing teachers. He's out of his mind. Malcolm continued unflinching. And third, the creation of a student equity board. Elected by peers. Their job will be to bring concerns directly to administration without fear. They'll have a seat at our monthly meetings. That sentence set the room ablaze. Hands shot up. Voices overlap. This isn't a democracy. We're trained professionals. You're undermining authority. This is too political. Malcolm waited until the noise exhausted itself. Politics, he said evenly, is what happens when power decides who gets to be heard. Education is supposed to be what happens when everyone does. A quiet spread across the room. Dwyer's voice broke the stillness. You're implying we're racist. He looked at her directly. I'm implying we can do better. Her jaw clenched. You don't know what it's like managing classrooms of 30 kids. Some of us have been here 20 years. And some of you stopped growing 19 years ago, he said softly. The gasp that followed was sharp. Even Howard's mask slipped for a second. Malcolm straightened. I understand change is uncomfortable, but comfort has never been the goal of education. Truth is, he closed the laptop. That's all for now. Expect official guidelines in your inbox tomorrow. Dismissed. No applause. Just silence and the shuffle of feet. When the auditorium cleared, Howard approached, forcing a smile. Old speech. Might need some polishing before the district hears about it. It wasn't for the district, Malcolm said. It was for the mirror. Howard tilted his head. Meaning, everyone needs to see themselves clearly before they can fix what's broken. Howard chuckled lightly, then leaned in. Just make sure they don't see too much, Dr. Reeves. People get defensive when they feel accused. They should, Malcolm said. Guilt's the first step to responsibility. Howard's smile thinned. I'll draft a summary of today's meeting. For transparency. I'm sure you will. They parted with polite nods that felt more like a duel than courtesy. By evening, the tension was everywhere. The staff group chat buzzed with coded outrage. Words like overreach, agenda, and witch hunt filled the thread. One message, anonymous. If he wants a war, he'll get one. Malcolm sat alone in his office. The overhead light dim. Through the window he could see the janitorial staff finishing their shifts. Mops moving methodically down the halls he once walked unseen. He envied their simplicity, the freedom of labor without politics. Laura knocked softly and stepped inside. You okay? He smiled faintly. Define okay. She sat across from him. You knew they'd push back. I counted on it. But not all of them are against you, she said. Some are scared. Scared of losing comfort, he said. Or scared of change.
Maybe both.
He leaned back. That's the thing about systemic rot. It grows in silence. The moment you name it, everyone hears an accusation. She hesitated. You made an impact today, even if they won't admit it. Impact isn't the same as progress. Sometimes it's the beginning of it, she said quietly. He smiled. You always sound like hope, and you sound like someone carrying too much. I've carried worse. She looked down, then back at him. Be careful. They'll come for you differently now. Not with insults, but with smiles. I know, he said. That's how power survives. She left without another word. Later that night, he stayed in the office long after everyone had gone. Papers scattered across his desk, reports open. His reflection faint in the window glass. He should have gone home, but something in him needed the stillness to measure the cost of what he'd just done. He looked at the mop leaning in the corner, the same one he'd used his first day undercover. It reminded him that power meant nothing if it couldn't touch the ground. A sound interrupted his thoughts. A faint rustle at the door. He stood, walked over, and saw an envelope slide through the narrow gap under the frame. It landed silently at his feet. He hesitated before picking it up. No name, no handwriting, just a single sheet inside. Typed in block letters. Go back to cleaning floors where you belong. He read it twice, then set it down on his desk. For a long time he just stared at it. The words were simple, but their poison was precise. A reminder that some minds would never separate the janitor from the man. He looked out the window again, the city lights flickering in the distance, and whispered to himself, I was cleaning more than floors. Behind him, the office clock ticked softly, marking the seconds, until the next confrontation he couldn't avoid. The backlash, when change feels like threat. The note sat on Malcolm's desk all weekend, a small square of paper that weighed more than any policy manual. Every time he glanced at it, he felt the same slow burn, not anger exactly, but the familiar ache of recognition. He'd been told to know his place in a dozen ways throughout his life. This was just the latest version written in Helvetica. By Monday morning, Roosevelt High had changed. Not physically the walls, the corridors, the cafeteria all looked the same, but the air had thickened, charged with something invisible and unspoken. The janitorial staff greeted him cautiously, eyes darting to make sure no one saw. Some teachers smiled too brightly. Others didn't meet his eyes at all. Politeness had become its own weapon. He passed two teachers whispering by the vending machine. Heard he's making the place political, one murmured. Doesn't surprise me, said the other. They always turn it into a race thing. Malcolm slowed his steps, let them feel his presence, and watched the color drain from their faces. Morning, he said evenly. They mumbled replies and vanished down the hall. He kept walking. It was going to be a long week. By mid-afternoon, the first wave of backlash reached his inbox. Subject: concerns regarding new initiatives. From Faculty Council, Anonymous. The message began politely. While we respect your vision, several staff members feel recent reforms create division, and ended with veiled hostility. We urge you to focus on education, not identity. Malcolm read it twice, then closed the laptop without replying. He'd seen this tactic before: bureaucracy dressed in diplomacy, prejudice in a suit and tie. The district had 100 ways to say be quiet without ever using those words. He rose from his chair and stared out the window. Outside, students were gathering in small groups, laughing, shouting, living. The world still turned, even when the system trembled. Behind him, a knock sounded on the door. Come in, he said. Laura stepped inside, clutching a folder to her chest. She looked nervous, the kind of nervous that comes from guilt you didn't earn. They're turning on you, she said softly. I noticed. It's not just staff, she continued. Parents are calling. Someone emailed the district saying you're pushing an agenda. He almost smiled. Truth always sounds like an agenda to those it exposes. She lowered her voice. I got pulled into a meeting this morning. Howard asked if I was helping you draft the new policies. And you told him that I support what's right. But, she hesitated, eyes flicking toward the door. They told me to be careful, that associating with you could complicate my standing here. Malcolm's jaw tightened. They want isolation, divide and discredit. Exactly. They can't challenge your competence, so they'll question your motives. He nodded slowly. And they'll use anyone they can to do it. Laura's eyes met his. I'm not going anywhere, but I wanted you to know they're planning something. Graham's been talking to reporters. Reporters? She nodded. He's spinning the story saying you posed as a janitor to spy on teachers, that you violated privacy laws. Malcolm exhaled through his nose. They're rewriting the narrative. They always do, she said quietly. That's how the system protects itself. He smiled faintly. Then we write it back. By Wednesday, the local teachers' union released a vague statement about the need for trust and transparency in leadership. The subtext wasn't vague at all. Then came the social media posts. Screenshots forwarded from parents' comments under district updates. This new principal's pushing a race agenda. So now teachers can't discipline anyone without being called racist? He should stick to cleaning floors. Malcolm scrolled in silence. The words blurred after a while, their sameness numbing rather than shocking. For every message of support from students or parents of color, there were 10 more dripping in coded contempt. Even the praise felt backhanded. He's so articulate, at least he means well. He closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, the ceiling fan whirring overhead. The disguise had once protected him. Now his title painted a target on his back. At lunch, the tension was visible even among the students. In the cafeteria, whispers rippled across tables. He really used to be a janitor? Nah, that's fake. My mom said he's trying to make white teachers look bad. Whatever. He helped my friend Maya. He's the only one who listens. Jordan sat near the back, watching the conversation unfold like a slow-motion collision. When one boy muttered, "Bet he got hired 'cause of diversity," Jordan's voice cut through. "He got hired because he's better than any of you'll ever be." The table went silent. Jordan gathered his tray and walked out, anger shaking beneath the surface. He didn't know that his father, standing unseen at the cafeteria entrance, had heard every word. That evening, Malcolm stayed late again, answering emails, documenting harassment discreetly. The paper trail mattered. Retaliation always came disguised as procedure. At 7:43 p.m., his office light was still on when Howard appeared in the doorway. "Long day, huh?" Howard said, tone almost sympathetic. "Productive," Malcolm replied. Howard stepped inside. "You're handling all this noise well. But the district's nervous. The board's getting pressure." "I'm sure they are." Howard sighed. "You've got to understand. This town isn't ready for drastic change." "Drastic?" Malcolm repeated. "You call fairness drastic?" Howard smiled carefully. "Progress takes time." Malcolm looked him dead in the eye. "Time's the luxury of the comfortable." The vice principal shifted his weight, the politeness cracking. "I'm just saying, maybe ease off the rhetoric. Let things cool down." Malcolm turned back to his computer. "Cooling down is what lets rot spread." Howard's expression hardened. "You can't win if you alienate everyone." "I didn't alienate them," Malcolm said quietly. "Truth did." Howard stood there for a moment longer, then muttered, "Suit yourself," and walked out. By Thursday morning, the pressure reached its breaking point. Students whispered in hallways. Teachers avoided eye contact. The local paper ran a headline, "Principal's undercover methods raise ethical questions." They quoted anonymous sources, concerned staff claiming he'd created an atmosphere of distrust. There was no mention of Maya, no mention of the slurs, the mockery, the humiliation, just a black man framed as the problem again. Malcolm read it once, then folded the paper neatly and set it aside. He refused to feed it power. Laura entered minutes later, looking pale. "You've seen it." "Yes. They're calling for an investigation." "Good," he said. "Maybe this time, the truth gets investigated too." She looked at him, the steadiness in his voice, the quiet fury behind it. "How do you keep calm?" He smiled sadly. "When you've lived in the storm long enough, rain just feels like air." That afternoon, the students began to see the cracks for themselves. In English class, a group discussion about ethics turned tense. A white student said, "People overreact. My parents say the principal's race stuff makes everything worse." Maya, sitting 2 rows back, raised her hand. "Maybe it's worse because now we can see it." The room went silent. The teacher stammered something about staying on topic. But the conversation had already changed. Truth once named couldn't be unspoken. By evening, Laura sent him a text. "You need to see this." A link followed. He clicked. The video opened on grainy footage, the staff lounge weeks earlier. The angle was low, hidden. There he was, in janitor uniform, mopping quietly in the corner. The camera caught everything. The jokes, the mockery, the casual prejudice. Someone, maybe Graham, must have filmed it secretly, framing it to look like comedy. The caption read, "When your principal thinks he's undercover, but he's just cleaning up his own mess." It had over 20,000 views in 2 hours. The comments were worse. "So this is our big reformer? LMAO, he should have stayed where he started. No wonder teachers don't respect him." Malcolm watched the loop play again and again, the laughter frozen in digital eternity. He could almost feel the mop in his hands again, the sting of invisibility resurrected on screen for the world to dissect. His phone buzzed nonstop, calls from the district, reporters, Even students trying to warn him the video was spreading like wildfire. He leaned back, eyes closed, every sound muffled by a slow rising hum in his ears. For years he had fought prejudice hidden behind professionalism. Now it had found the perfect disguise: entertainment. The light from his computer flickered across his face as he whispered to himself, "They don't see the man. They only see the floor he cleaned." Then, from outside the office door, a sound quiet but distinct. A soft slip of paper sliding under the frame. Another envelope. He picked it up, heart pounding. Inside, a single printed line. "We told you this would happen." The screen still glowed with his image, looping endlessly. The janitor, the principal, the symbol. The video was viral now. And tomorrow, everyone in the country would know his name, for all the wrong reasons. The viral storm, when the world picks a side. The envelope still sat on his desk when dawn came. The paper inside looked harmless. White, clean, ordinary, but its single sentence kept circling his mind like a vulture. "You should have stayed in your office, Principal Reeves." By sunrise, Dr. Malcolm Reeves had made his choice. The disguise had done its work. Now it was time to stand in his own name. He pressed his suit, clipped on the small district badge that bore his title, and for the first time since arriving at Roosevelt High, looked at himself in the mirror not as an observer, but as the authority he had always been. The reflection stared back. A black man with eyes that had seen too much in too short a time. His jaw was set, his silence rehearsed. Today the building would see him even if it refused to recognize what it saw. When he stepped through the main doors, the hum of early morning chatter stopped mid-sentence. The same teachers who had brushed past the janitor last week now turned with startled politeness. "Good morning, Dr. Reeves," said Vice Principal Howard, appearing almost magically by the front office. His handshake was overly firm, his smile professional enough to hurt. "Welcome to Roosevelt High. We've been looking forward to your leadership." Malcolm returned the shake. "Morning, Howard." Behind the counter, the secretary, who hadn't met his eyes once as the custodian, now straightened her blouse. "Coffee? We keep the good blend for administration." He smiled thinly. "I'll pass, thank you." A few teachers lingered nearby, whispering. Miss Porter's face flushed as recognition settled. Mr. Graham stiffened. Miss Dwyer, standing by the copier, froze mid-button. The silence that followed was louder than any greeting. Howard clapped his hands once. "Everyone, this is our new principal. Let's give him a warm Roosevelt welcome." A ripple of applause followed, hesitant, hollow, choreographed. The same mouths that had spoken carelessly about those kids now formed perfect smiles. "Appreciate the welcome," Malcolm said, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Let's get to work." He spent the morning walking the hallways, not as the invisible cleaner, but as the man whose name was on every doorplate. Students watched curiously. Some whispered that the new principal looked familiar. A few black students exchanged quick smiles of relief, as if his presence itself was a promise that someone finally saw them. In the staff lounge, he stopped by the same table where he'd once scrubbed coffee stains. "We'll have a faculty meeting after classes today," he said evenly. "Mandatory attendance." Howard nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. I'll make the announcement." Malcolm turned to leave, then paused. "And Howard, no refreshments this time. Let's keep it short and honest." Howard blinked. "Of course." Miss Dwyer avoided his gaze entirely. Miss Porter offered a brittle laugh. "Well, Dr. Reeves, quite an undercover entrance you made." He looked at her. "Sometimes you learn more with a mop than with a memo." She swallowed, the smile fading. By midday, word of his true identity had spread through the building. Teachers who once ignored his greetings now called him sir. Doors opened faster. Compliments bloomed like weeds. "You have such presence," said one. "So inspiring to have representation in leadership," said another. Each phrase sounded rehearsed, pulled from a diversity seminar. He thanked them with professional courtesy, but inside he catalogued every face, every tone. Politeness, he thought, was just another mask for power. When he entered the cafeteria, the students erupted in murmurs. "That's him," someone whispered. Jordan, sitting at a corner table, froze mid-bite. Their eyes met across the noise. Father and son acknowledging the secret they'd shared in silence. Jordan's lips curved in the faintest, proudest smile. It was enough. The faculty meeting began at 3 o'clock sharp. The same lounge where he had once emptied trash bins was now arranged with chairs facing a projector screen. A platter of untouched cookies sat in the corner, an awkward attempt at normalcy. "Thank you for staying late," Malcolm began. His tone was measured, not warm. "I wanted to start my tenure by saying I've had the privilege of observing this school for several days." Quietly. Nervous shifting followed. He let the silence stretch until it almost hurt.
"I've seen excellence," he continued. "I've also seen blind spots, moments when bias hid behind policy, moments when our students were disciplined, not for what they did, but for who they are."
Miss Dwyer's jaw tightened. Mr. Graham crossed his arms. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," Malcolm said. "But Roosevelt High is going to change. Not because the district demands it, but because integrity demands it." Howard cleared his throat. "Of course, Dr. Reeves. Equity is one of our core values." Malcolm turned to him. "Equity isn't a value if it only exists on posters." The room fell still again. He could feel the heat of unspoken defensiveness rising like humidity. Laura Kemp raised her hand. "What changes do you plan to make?" "Accountability," he said simply. "Training, mentorship, open classrooms, new disciplinary oversight, and a board that includes student voices." Several teachers exchanged wary looks. Miss Porter muttered, "Sounds political." "It's personal," Malcolm replied. "Because the harm we ignore becomes the culture we live in." After the meeting, the teachers filed out slower than usual. Some offered perfunctory handshakes, others slipped away without a word. Dwyer lingered, her smile crisp, brittle. "Dr. Reeves," she said sweetly, "I hope you don't think I'm one of the blind spots. I run a tight ship because I care." He met her eyes. "Care shouldn't hurt." She flushed, then forced a laugh. "You're going to do great things here." He didn't answer. When she left, Laura approached quietly. "That was bold," she murmured. "They'll smile to your face and plan against you tomorrow." "I know," he said. "But they can't pretend they don't know anymore." The week unfolded like a slow-burning play. In meetings, teachers complimented him with mechanical enthusiasm. In corridors, they praised diversity of leadership. Yet beneath the compliments, resistance gathered in whispers. One morning he overheard two staff members by the copier. "Everything's about race now," one sighed. The other chuckled. "We'll survive the quota experiment." He stepped into view. They froze, stammering greetings. He smiled politely. "Good morning, quotas or not. Let's aim for excellence." Their laughter died instantly. By Friday the facade had thickened. The lounge buzzed with performative warmth when he entered. "Dr. Reeves, join us. We were just saying how lucky we are." It was politeness sharpened into armor. He sat at the end of the table, letting them talk. Stories about weekend plans, conferences, children, normalcy carefully staged. Then came the inevitable crack. Mr. Graham leaned back, smirking. "So Howard," he said loudly, "when do we get our diversity bonus? Seems like we're checking all the boxes these days." A few teachers chuckled. Porter added, "Guess we finally hit the quota." Laughter rippled around the table. Quick, nervous, too loud. Malcolm set his coffee down. "Excuse me?" The laughter stopped. He looked at each of them in turn. "A quota hire," he repeated softly. "That's what you think this is?" No one answered. The silence thickened. Graham forced a grin. "It's just a joke." Malcolm's voice stayed calm. "Jokes reveal more truth than statements ever do." He stood, the chair legs scraping lightly against the tile. "I'll see you all in Monday's briefing. We'll be discussing professional conduct." Howard tried to smooth it over. "Oh, come on. Dr. Reeves. They didn't mean." "I heard exactly what they meant." He left the room, footsteps echoing down the hall. Behind him, the teachers sat in awkward quiet. Then, somewhere near the coffee pot, someone laughed again, small, defiant, mean, and once one person laughed, the rest followed. Quieter this time, but just as poisonous. Outside, Malcolm stopped by the window, overlooking the courtyard. Students streamed out to buses, sunlight flashing on backpacks and hair beads, and freedom. He watched them, his reflection overlapping theirs in the glass. Principal and janitor, reformer and target, two versions of the same man. He thought of Jordan, of Maya, of every student still learning to measure their worth by the softness of their tone. The hallway clock ticked toward 4. In the reflection he saw Howard's figure appear at the far end, holding a folder, heading his way. Howard called out, voice pleasant. "Dr. Reeves, got a moment? District wants an update on that investigation you mentioned."
Malcolm turned slowly. "Of course."
Howard's smile widened. practiced and polite. Good. Let's talk somewhere private. For a second, the corridor seemed to stretch between them. Bright, empty, humming with secrets. Malcolm nodded once and followed, the sound of laughter from the lounge fading behind him. He didn't yet know that the meeting Howard proposed wasn't about progress. It was about containment. The announcement, a new principal's plan to shake the system. By dawn, Roosevelt High was trending. The video, the one showing the janitor mopping quietly while teachers laughed, had left the small orbit of the school overnight and exploded across the internet. 15-second clips circulated on TikTok with dramatic captions. Twitter threads dissected every word spoken in the lounge. Facebook parents groups divided like fault lines. The original post had surpassed 1 million views before breakfast. Malcolm Reeves' name, Dr. Malcolm Reeves, principal of Roosevelt High, now sat beside headlines that read like moral riddles. Hero or hoax? Principal poses as janitor to test his own staff. Undercover educator. Exposes racism. Or betrays trust. When leadership crosses the line. The irony, Malcolm thought bitterly, was that he hadn't crossed a line at all. He had simply cleaned one, and everyone else's dirt had floated to the surface. When he arrived at the school that morning, the parking lot was half full and eerily quiet. A local news van idled by the gate, antenna raised. Reporters leaned on car doors, rehearsing intros. Flashbulbs popped the moment he stepped out of his sedan. Dr. Reeves, did you authorize that footage? Do you regret deceiving your staff? Were you trying to expose racism or exploit it? He didn't answer. Cameras always wanted sound bites, not truth. Inside, the building buzzed with nervous electricity. Students whispered in clusters, phones lighting up with the same looped video. Some smiled in pride, others in discomfort. The teachers looked split down the middle, half avoiding him, half pretending to support him out of self-preservation. Howard intercepted him at the door of the main office, clipboard in hand, expression rehearsed. Rough morning, he said flatly. Depends who you ask. Howard's voice dropped. The district's on fire. You're in every feed, every group chat. We've got reporters calling for statements. Malcolm looked him dead in the eye. Then tell them the truth. Howard gave a brittle laugh. The truth's whatever headline wins. By midday, the story had reached every major outlet in the region. Some praised him as a visionary. Black principal's bold undercover move exposes inequity. Others painted him as reckless. Trust violated. School staff outraged by covert operation. The news cycle spun faster than he could think. In classrooms, students watched the clips between lessons. Some of them, especially the Black and Latino kids, saw something they'd never seen before. A man who looked like them standing up, not just talking about justice, but proving it. Maya Thompson watched the video from her desk during lunch, her hands trembling slightly. She had thought her humiliation in room 29 would stay buried forever. Now the world was watching, and though it scared her, it also made her feel seen for the first time. Jordan found her by the vending machines. That's you, isn't it? He asked softly. She nodded. I didn't know he recorded it. He didn't, Jordan said. Someone else did. Her brow furrowed. Then why post it? To make him look like a fool, Jordan said. But it backfired. Maya smiled faintly. Good. They needed to see what it feels like. In the staff lounge, the mood was entirely different. Ms. Dwyer sat stiffly at the table, phone face down, knuckles white. This is a witch hunt, she muttered. They're turning us into villains. Porter nodded. It's out of control. I've got parents emailing me like I'm some kind of monster. Graham added. We should lawyer up. He had no right to record us. Dwyer snapped. He didn't record it. Someone leaked it. But now we're the racists of the week. Howard entered mid-conversation. Keep your voices down. The cameras are outside. Maybe you should tell him that, Dwyer hissed. He started this. Howard exhaled. We can't talk like this here. District's calling a special board session tonight. About what? Porter asked. Howard hesitated. His position. The room fell silent. At 2:00 p.m., Malcolm called an emergency assembly for staff and students in the auditorium. He knew it was a risk, but silence had never protected the truth. When he stepped onto the stage, phones immediately lifted like flashlights. The crowd was a mixture of curiosity and confrontation. Cameras from local news stations lined the back wall. Malcolm stood at the podium, his posture calm, his eyes tired but unbroken. You've all seen the footage, he began. So have I. A hush fell over the room. I didn't plan for that video to go public, he said. But I can't pretend I'm sorry it did. Because for once, people are talking about what's real, not what's comfortable. He paused, scanning the sea of faces. When I came here, I wanted to understand what my students were up against. Not from the curriculum, but from the culture. What I saw wasn't evil, not in the obvious way. It was subtle. It smiled. It said things like, we treat everyone the same, while acting as though equality is a threat. The silence deepened. Even his critics couldn't look away. If you feel exposed, he continued, good. That means something inside you knows there's truth in it. If you feel angry, ask yourself, are you angry because it's unfair, or because it's finally being seen? Laura, sitting near the front, blinked back tears. Malcolm's tone softened. This isn't about hate, it's about healing. And healing hurts when you're used to comfort. For a moment, the entire auditorium seemed to breathe in unison. Then from the back, a voice shouted, you humiliated us. Malcolm looked toward the sound. It was Graham, standing in the aisle, red-faced. You lied to everyone, Graham shouted. You pretended to be one of us just to make us look bad. Malcolm's reply was calm. If truth makes you look bad, that's not on me. A ripple of applause broke from the students. Tentative at first, then growing. Teachers shifted uneasily, their power recalibrating before their eyes. Malcolm looked back at the crowd. This school belongs to all of you. Every voice, every shade, every story. If that threatens anyone, maybe they've mistaken authority for ownership. Applause swelled louder, then thundered. The cameras caught it all. That night, every local station aired clips from the speech. Some commentators called him courageous. Others called him divisive. Jared Reeves trended on social media, torn between admiration and outrage. Finally, someone calling out the hypocrisy in education. This guy's destroying a good school to push guilt. Hero, race baiter, truth teller, manipulator. America had chosen its sides, and Malcolm had become both symbol and scapegoat. At home, Jordan watched the coverage in silence. He saw his father on the screen, calm, steady, refusing to bow, and felt pride swelling beneath his confusion. His mother, Dana, muted the TV. He's brave, she said quietly, but I worry. Jordan looked at her. Why? Because this country doesn't like being told the mirror's cracked. Meanwhile, inside the district headquarters, panic meetings filled the evening. Board members whispered in hallways. Public relations teams drafted statements every 10 minutes, revising every word. The optics are catastrophic, one executive groaned. Half the town's calling him a hero, half wants him fired. A woman from legal asked, can we justify termination? Howard, sitting at the end of the table, chose his words carefully. He violated trust, went undercover without authorization. The teachers' union is furious. The superintendent rubbed his temples. We can't be seen as retaliating against a black principal for exposing racism. But we can't let this chaos continue either. So what do we do? Asked another. The superintendent sighed. We control the narrative. He picked up the phone. Malcolm was still in his office when it rang. The clock read 10:40. He hesitated before answering. Dr. Reeves, the voice said. Low, deliberate, practiced. Superintendent Keller. Evening, Malcolm said quietly. I assume you've seen the coverage. I have. Keller's tone was smooth, managerial. It's become untenable. The district's taking heat from every direction. The board's under pressure to stabilize the situation. Malcolm's grip on the receiver tightened. By firing me. I didn't say that, Keller replied, but resignation looks better on everyone. Malcolm leaned back, staring at the mop still propped in the corner, a silent witness to everything. You mean it looks better on you, Dr. Reeves? Keller said. I understand your intentions, but this is bigger than one man. The district can't survive a PR war. Then maybe it shouldn't. A long pause. You're an intelligent man, Keller said finally. Don't let pride ruin your career. Malcolm's voice was steady. Pride didn't get me here. Truth did. Think about it, Keller said, tone chillingly polite. We'll expect your decision by morning. The line went dead. Malcolm sat in the silence, phone still in his hand. The hum of the city faint through the window. Outside, the headlines glowed on every screen, his name turning into a debate he no longer controlled. He looked once more at the mop in the corner, the symbol of the man they'd mocked, and whispered, I cleaned your floors, now I'll clean your conscience. But deep down, he knew that before he could fix anything, he might have to lose everything. The phone buzzed again, this time a new message. From an unknown number. If you won't resign, they'll make you. The words stared back at him like prophecy. The pressure. When integrity costs everything. The phone screen still glowed in the darkness when Malcolm finally set it face down. He could feel the words burning through the silence of his office. If you won't resign, they'll make you. It was past midnight, but he couldn't leave. He had spent his entire life proving that integrity could survive politics, and now he was watching that belief disintegrate under fluorescent light. He poured himself a cup of coffee. Gone cold. The clock ticked toward 1 a.m. Every sound, the hum of the air vent, the tap of rain on glass, seemed amplified by the isolation pressing against his chest. He opened his laptop and reread the superintendent's email, carefully worded to sound procedural, but dripping with threat. Pending review of recent events, the board will convene an emergency session to evaluate your fitness for leadership. Translation. They're coming for you. He drafted a reply, deleted it, then drafted again, but there was no way to reason with fear disguised as professionalism. He closed the lid and rubbed his temples. The mop in the corner caught his eye again. The symbol of humility that had exposed hypocrisy. He whispered to himself, they loved me invisible, but they can't stomach me visible. When he arrived at the school the next morning, whispers chased him like wind through the halls. Students stared openly now. Staff whispered less cautiously. His face was everywhere, on screens, in conversations, in the tension that followed him like a shadow. Howard greeted him at the entrance, voice heavy with staged concern. Tough week, huh? Still standing, Malcolm said. Howard's smile twitched. Well, I hope you keep that energy. The board's moving fast. There's talk of a hearing Friday. So soon? Pressure's building, Howard replied. They want closure. Or silence. Howard chuckled nervously. Just be smart, okay? Malcolm met his eyes. Smart is what got me here. By midday, the administrative office hummed with unease. Reporters called nonstop. Parents demanded statements. The district's PR team circulated talking points that reduced everything to a misunderstanding of procedure. It was an erasure disguised as diplomacy. Around noon, Laura appeared at his doorway. Her expression was tight. Guilt? Fear? Maybe both. Can we talk? She asked. He gestured to the chair. Always. She sat folding her hands. They called me in this morning. District attorneys. HR. Keller was there too. He studied her face. And? They're investigating the methods you used. They said I might be asked to provide a statement. Statement about what? That you manipulated the staff. That you staged certain interactions to make them look worse. Malcolm's pulse slowed, cold and deliberate. They want to rewrite the truth. She nodded weakly. They said if I corroborate their version, it'll protect my position. Otherwise, he finished the sentence for her. Otherwise you become me. She looked down. I didn't agree to anything, but Keller made it sound like the decision's already written. He stood, pacing slowly. You've always known what was happening here. You saw it yourself. So why are they coming to you? Because I'm the only one who didn't treat you like an outsider, she said quietly. They think loyalty equals leverage. Her voice trembled. I don't know what to do. He stopped by the window, watching students pass outside. Do what's right, Laura. That's what you told me to do. I know, she whispered. But right doesn't pay bills. Her words hit harder than she intended. He turned back. You think I don't know that cost? Tears welled in her eyes. I'm scared. So am I, he admitted. But fear's the currency they trade in. Every system like this feeds on it. The moment we buy in, we pay with our conscience. She rose to leave but lingered by the door. If I testify, it'll break me. If you don't, they'll still find someone else who will. She hesitated. Maybe they already have. What do you mean? She shook her head. Just be careful who you trust. And then she was gone. That afternoon, the school felt like a stage where every actor had learned new lines overnight. Teachers greeted him with over-politeness, their smiles too bright to be sincere. Conversations stopped when he passed. Even the janitors, his quiet comrades from weeks before, avoided eye contact, afraid association might cost them their jobs. By late evening, the loneliness had grown unbearable. He sat in his office staring at his reflection in the dark window, the glow of his computer illuminating the fatigue in his face. It wasn't the exhaustion of work. It was the exhaustion of being constantly misread. He thought about his father, a man who'd spent decades teaching in underfunded schools, fighting invisible wars against bias and bureaucracy. His father used to say, "They'll love your labor, son, but not your leadership." Malcolm finally understood. The next day, Keller's office sent an official notice. Subject: request for statement. Allegations of misconduct. It was phrased like routine protocol, but everyone knew it was a prelude to termination. He printed the letter, folded it, and slid it into his drawer beside the anonymous note that had started it all. Laura didn't come to work that day. Howard, on the other hand, seemed unusually cheerful. He stopped by Malcolm's office mid-morning. "Big day, huh? Board's eager to wrap this up." Malcolm didn't look up. "You sound almost happy." Howard smirked. "Just pragmatic. You pushed too hard, too fast. People don't like mirrors." Malcolm leaned back in his chair. "You mean people don't like seeing who's holding the mirror?" Howard shrugged. "Same thing." When he left, Malcolm's hand curled into a fist against the desk. Not from rage, but restraint. At 3 p.m., his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "They're meeting without you. Boardroom 4B. Keller. Howard. Dwyer. Decisions already made." He read it twice, then rose from his chair. His steps echoed down the empty corridor as he made his way toward the boardroom. Through the small glass pane in the door, he could see them, 6 figures around a table, voices low, faces tight with calculation. He recognized Keller's profile, Howard's forced grin, and Dwyer's crossed arms. On the screen at the far end, Laura's face flickered through a video call window. His heart sank. He opened the door. Conversation froze. "Don't stop on my account," he said evenly. Keller cleared his throat. "Dr. Reeves, this is a closed session." "Clearly not," Malcolm said, glancing at the video monitor. "I didn't realize my character was up for auction." "Please," Keller began. "Let's keep this professional." "Professional?" Malcolm repeated, stepping closer. "Is that what you call conspiring without the accused present?" Howard rose. "This isn't about conspiracy. It's about resolution." Dwyer added, "You brought this on yourself." He looked at her. "You humiliated a child. I exposed it." "That's the difference between us," Keller interjected. "We're not revisiting old incidents. We're determining what's best for the district." Malcolm folded his arms. "And what's best for the district conveniently means what's worst for accountability." Laura's face on the screen looked stricken, frozen between loyalty and fear. Keller noticed her hesitation. "Miss Kemp," he said smoothly, "you've worked closely with Dr. Reeves. Would you say his approach has undermined morale?" Her lips parted. Silence. Then, barely audible, the word felt like a blade. Malcolm's breath caught, the air suddenly thin. "Laura." She looked at him through the screen, tears pooling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "They threatened my certification." He stared for a long moment, not angry, not even shocked, just hollow. "So this is how truth dies," he said softly. "Not from lies, from surrender." Keller cleared his throat again. "We appreciate your cooperation, Miss Kemp. We'll proceed accordingly." He looked back at Malcolm. "You'll receive official notice within 24 hours. For now, you're on administrative leave." Malcolm nodded slowly. "You can take the title, but not the reason it mattered." Then he turned and walked out, before the silence could crush him. That evening, the school corridors were empty. His office looked stripped of meaning. The certificates on the wall suddenly felt like props in someone else's play. He sat at his desk, hands clasped, staring at the dim glow of his monitor. His inbox was flooded. Media requests, parent messages, staff statements. Every line of text felt like another layer of static around the truth. He scrolled mechanically until one subject caught his eye. No sender, no timestamp, just a single line of text. "Meet me in the parking lot, if you want the truth." He leaned back, pulse quickening. It could be a threat. It could be a setup. But after days of lies, truth was the only word that still carried weight. He shut the laptop, grabbed his coat, and stepped into the empty hallway. The lights overhead flickered faintly, buzzing like nervous witnesses. Each step echoed against tile until he reached the door leading out to the night. The parking lot stretched before him, wide, wet from earlier rain, lit by half-working lamps. At the far end, a shadow moved beside a car. He paused, heartbeat steady, eyes narrowing. Whoever it was had been waiting. The truth in the dark, a confession that changes everything. The rain had returned, soft at first, whispering against windshields, beating on the cracked asphalt. Malcolm stepped from the doorway and crossed the lot. shoes splashing through shallow puddles that shimmered under flickering lamplight. The figure waiting by the far car didn't move. "Dr. Reeves?" a voice called, low, uncertain. Malcolm stopped a few feet away. "Who are you?" The man stepped into the light. It was Curtis Dean, one of the night janitors. Heavy-set, mid-50s, quiet. The kind of man who'd blended into background hum his entire career. Tonight he looked different. Alert, frightened, determined. "I sent the message," Curtis said, glancing around. "Had to be careful. They watch everything now." Malcolm folded his arms. "What truth are we talking about?" Curtis reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small flash drive, the metal casing glinting like a secret. "This." Malcolm's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" "Footage," Curtis said. "From the lounge. From a few classrooms. Even the main hall cameras. Before everything blew up." Malcolm's breath caught. "You recorded them?" Curtis nodded. "Started a few months ago. Not supposed to, maintenance staff ain't got permission. But after what I seen, I had to. You remember that girl Maya? I saw how they treated her. I saw worse." He hesitated, eyes shining in the rain. "Nobody ever believes people like me. So I made sure they'd have to." Malcolm took a step closer. "Why tell me now?" "'Cause they're coming for you," Curtis said. "Heard Howard talking in the break room after hours. Said the board's gonna pin all this on you, say you violated privacy laws. Say you spied on staff. They already got Laura's statement. Only thing gonna stop them is proof they were dirty first." Malcolm looked at the flash drive. It seemed to pulse in Curtis's hand like something alive. "What's on it exactly?" Curtis's voice dropped.
Everything. Them joking about the loud kids.
Dwyer calling students projects. Howard saying test scores drop 'cause those families don't care. I even got the day you walked in as janitor. They laughed right after you left the room. Malcolm felt the world tilt. "And you're sure it's clear?" Curtis nodded. "Crystal. But if you recorded without consent..." "Yeah," Curtis interrupted. "I broke policy. Same way you did. But difference is, my camera caught the poison before they buried it." Lightning flashed behind them, throwing their shadows long across the pavement. Malcolm took the drive slowly, turning it over in his hand. "If I use this, it'll blow up the district." Curtis gave a grim smile. "Good. Maybe it needs blowing up." He turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. There's footage of you too." Malcolm looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "From the classrooms. When you were still acting janitor, cameras caught you talking to kids. Sometimes staying after hours. Nothing bad, but the lawyers'll twist it. They'll say you violated confidentiality." Malcolm's pulse slowed, heavy and deliberate. "So if I use the evidence, I incriminate myself." Curtis nodded. "That's the truth." Rain hissed between them like static. Malcolm exhaled. "Why are you risking this, Curtis?" "Because I'm tired," the man said quietly. "Tired of watching good folks get crushed just 'cause they're brown or poor or both. You fought for them when nobody else did. Figured someone ought to fight for you." Malcolm felt a lump rise in his throat. "Thank you." Curtis looked away. "Just make it mean something." Then he climbed into his car and drove off, taillights disappearing into the dark. Back inside, Malcolm locked his office door and slipped the flash drive into his laptop. The screen blinked to life. Folder. Roosevelt Cameras Archive. Dozens of files, each labeled by date. He clicked one at random. The staff lounge appeared, familiar and sterile. The voices came next, mocking. Careless. These kids don't listen. Their parents don't care. Some of them act like gangsters. We can't fix culture. Laughter. Then a pause. At least the janitor keeps his head down. Yeah, bet he's related to half of them. Malcolm's stomach twisted. He skipped ahead. Another file. Another day. Now the camera faced a classroom. Dwyer again, standing over Maya. That hair's not appropriate for school. You want attention, go get it somewhere else. But no buts. Fix it. The rubber band snapped. Maya winced. The class laughed. Malcolm froze the frame on the girl's face. Humiliation captured forever in pixels. He sat back, rubbing his eyes. Another file. Howard. In the hallway with Graham. District wants numbers up. Maybe if we stop suspending every loud black kid, they'll stop calling us biased. Or maybe we just need better janitors. Laughter again. Cheap. Cruel. He slammed the laptop shut, breath shaking. This was it, everything he'd fought to prove, all on a single drive. But Curtis had been right. Several clips also showed Malcolm himself. walking through restricted areas, observing classes after hours, entering offices he technically wasn't supposed to. In isolation. Harmless. Out of context. Damning. He opened the laptop again, scrolling to the final file. A timestamp from 2 nights earlier. His own face filled the screen, sitting in this very office, unaware of the small camera hidden in the ceiling vent. They loved me invisible, but they can't stomach me visible. His voice, clear as confession. He closed his eyes. Someone, maybe Curtis, maybe another staffer, had installed cameras long before he knew. Proof and liability. All tangled together. He leaned back, whispering to the empty room, "You can't expose darkness without lighting yourself on fire." The next morning, his email was flooded again. Reporters requesting comment, activists asking for interviews, parents demanding answers. He ignored them all. The flash drive sat beside his keyboard like a moral landmine. At 9, Laura appeared in the doorway. She looked worse than before. Eyes red, shoulders tight. "They suspended me," she said flatly. "For what?" "For refusing to give them more than one statement. Keller said I was obstructing the process." Malcolm gestured for her to sit. "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "Don't be. I deserve it." He studied her face. "You told the truth eventually, didn't you?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I retracted the statement last night, sent an affidavit to the district lawyer. But it might be too late. They want a scapegoat." He reached into the drawer and slid the flash drive across the desk. "This might change that." Her brow furrowed. "What is it?" "Evidence. From Curtis. Cameras he hid to protect the truth." She froze. "Cameras? That's illegal, Malcolm." "So is racism," he said quietly. "Does it show what they did?" "It shows everything." She swallowed hard. "Then release it." He didn't answer. He stared at the flash drive like it might bite him. Laura leaned forward. "If it proves what happened, it also proves I broke protocol," he said. "If I send it to the media, I lose my license, my job, maybe even get charged." Her eyes softened. "And if you don't, then the same people keep teaching those kids, and nobody ever believes it happened." The weight of those two truths pressed the air from the room. Laura whispered, "You can't save both." He looked at her. "Then maybe I don't deserve to." That evening, he drove home through heavy rain. The streets blurred beneath streaks of water and light. In the passenger seat, the flash drive sat inside a sealed envelope, labeled "To whom it may concern." At home, Jordan was watching television, the news still looping his father's name, his face, his story. Dana muted the screen when Malcolm entered. "You look tired," she said. He managed a half smile. "I feel ancient." Jordan looked up. "Dad, you're trending again. People are saying you're the reason schools are racist." Malcolm sighed. "If the truth makes them uncomfortable, that means it's working." Dana crossed her arms. "They're calling for your resignation." "I know."
Are you going to fight?
He looked at the envelope on the table. "I'm deciding what kind of fight it's going to be." She came closer. "Whatever you choose, make sure it's something our son can live proud of." He nodded. "That's the only thing I still care about." Later that night, long after they'd gone to bed, Malcolm sat alone in the living room. The only light came from the lamp beside him, and the flicker of the muted TV. On the screen, commentators debated him like an idea instead of a person. He opened his laptop and inserted the flash drive one more time. The folder glowed. Every file was a wound. He opened his email, addressed it to a journalist he trusted. Attached the folder, his finger hovered over send. He could already imagine the consequences. Licenses revoked. Lawsuits. Headlines calling him reckless, dishonest, radical. But he could also imagine Maya seeing justice. Jordan seeing proof that truth mattered more than safety. His cursor trembled over the button. He whispered to himself, "If I release it, I save them, but lose me. If I hide it, I become what I hate." The rain outside intensified, drumming against the glass like a verdict. His phone buzzed. Another message from Curtis. "Whatever you do, make sure it's for them kids, not revenge." Malcolm stared at the screen. Then at the glowing word "send." Lightning flashed, white and blinding. He closed his eyes and clicked. The screen froze for a second, then blinked back. Upload in progress 63%, the slow crawl of destiny in digital form. He exhaled, half relief, half terror. But just as the bar reached 74%, his Wi-Fi cut out. The signal light on the router went dark. He frowned, tapped refresh. Nothing. Then, from outside, he heard the unmistakable sound of tires on wet pavement. Slow, deliberate. A car idling near his house. Headlights off. He went to the window. Couldn't see faces, just silhouettes. The router light flickered once, then died completely. On his laptop, the upload error flashed. Connection lost. He backed away from the window, pulse hammering. The flash drive still sat in the port, blinking faintly like a heartbeat. He whispered, "They know." Outside, the car engine revved once, and then the lights snapped on, flooding the room through the blinds. The exposure, when truth becomes danger. The headlights seared through the blinds like interrogation lamps. Malcolm stood frozen, every instinct telling him not to move. The car idled for several seconds, the hum of the engine filling the silence between thunderclaps. Then slowly it pulled away, tires hissing over the wet pavement. He didn't breathe until the sound disappeared entirely. When he looked back at his laptop, the upload had failed. Connection lost. The file remained half-sent, visible proof of a truth still trapped. He removed the flash drive, pocketed it carefully, and shut down the system. The power flickered again, dimming the room to shadows. He whispered to himself, "If they want silence, they're too late." By morning the storm had passed, but the damage had already spread. The district had called for an emergency public hearing, a special review of administrative conduct. The invitation arrived in the form of a certified envelope hand-delivered to his door. Date Wednesday. Location Roosevelt District Board Chamber. Subject allegations of misconduct, breach of policy, and ethical violation. The formal tone barely hid the intent. They weren't reviewing. They were preparing to bury him. Dana watched him read the letter, her face pale. "They're not going to listen," she said softly. "They'll have to," he replied. "And if they don't, then they'll hear me anyway." She reached for his hand. "Please, don't go in alone." He looked at her, eyes tired but steady. "I haven't been alone since I started this." The boardroom that evening looked more like a courtroom. Rows of chairs filled with teachers, parents, students, and reporters. Cameras lined the back wall. Microphones glowed red at the long oak table where the board sat. Superintendent Keller occupied the center seat, expression neutral and perfectly staged. To his left sat Howard, wearing a tailored suit and a smile too polished to be sincere. Laura was also there, eyes downcast, summoned as a witness. Malcolm entered quietly, flanked by his attorney, a soft-spoken woman named Denise Carter, who believed in process more than politics. The murmurs rippled through the room as he took his seat at the front. To the audience, he was the man from the viral video. To the board, he was the problem they needed to manage. Keller began. "This hearing is to address recent actions by Dr. Malcolm Reeves, principal of Roosevelt High, in regard to unauthorized surveillance, staff misconduct, and professional ethics." He spoke like a man narrating a documentary, calm and detached. Malcolm watched him closely, hands folded, heartbeat slow but heavy. Keller continued, "We will review testimony from staff members, administrative reports, and relevant footage. Dr. Reeves will have the opportunity to respond." He nodded to Howard. "Mr. Howard, you may proceed." Howard stood, clicking a remote that dimmed the light slightly. The projector hummed to life, displaying stills from the leaked footage. The room tensed. Howard spoke, as if delivering a lecture. "While we recognize Dr. Reeves's intent to understand school culture, his methods posing as janitorial staff without consent constitute a violation of district trust and privacy. His actions have damaged morale and public confidence." He let that hang in the air, then gestured toward Dwyer, sitting smugly near the witness area. "Ms. Dwyer, can you describe how Dr. Reeves's behavior affected you and your colleagues?" She stood, smoothing her blouse, voice laced with performative dignity. "I felt deceived, betrayed. We work hard every day for these students. To find out our own principal was spying on us? It's humiliating." Howard nodded sympathetically. "And you felt unsafe?" "Absolutely." Malcolm's jaw clenched. Howard turned to Keller. "No further questions." Denise Carter rose. "Miss Dwyer," she said calmly, "in that footage we also hear you calling a student's hair a distraction. Is that correct?" Dwyer stiffened. "I was maintaining classroom decorum." "By humiliating a child?" "I didn't humiliate her." "Then why did she cry?" Murmurs filled the room. Dwyer's lips thinned. "You're twisting context." "No," Denise said quietly. "The camera didn't twist anything. It simply recorded what was already there. The board chair rapped the gavel. Order. Howard called the next witness. Laura. Her steps were hesitant, her voice trembling. Ms. Kemp, Howard began. You worked closely with Dr. Reeves. Did he inform you of his undercover intentions? No, she said softly. Did he ask you to keep secrets from administration? No, Howard frowned. But you were aware of his unconventional methods? She looked at Malcolm. I was aware he wanted to see the truth. That's not what I asked. She hesitated. I believed his intentions were good. So you admit his methods weren't? Her voice cracked. I admit the system made honesty impossible. A low murmur rose again. Keller's gavel struck the table. Ms. Kemp, please restrict your comments to the question. She swallowed hard. Then the answer is yes. Howard smiled.
Thank you.
Malcolm looked down, not at her but at his own hands. He could hear the unspoken apology in her silence. When it was his turn, he stood slowly. No lawyer, no notes, just truth. I won't defend deception, he began, but I will defend why I had to use it. The audience leaned forward. When I came to Roosevelt, I inherited a school that looked fine on paper and broken in reality. Discipline numbers told one story, classrooms told another. Students of color were punished more, praised less, and silenced often. And when I asked why, I was told, that's just how it is. He looked directly at Dwyer. So I found out for myself. He let the silence breathe. Yes, I went undercover. Because cameras were already there, watching students, not staff. Because the system policed their behavior, not ours. Because truth needed a witness. He turned toward the board. If that makes me unfit for leadership, so be it. But if I had stayed silent, I'd be unfit for humanity. The murmurs swelled again. Louder this time. No longer one-sided. Denise whispered, "You're winning them." But Keller's expression didn't change. He leaned forward. Let's proceed to the footage. The lights dimmed fully now. The projector flickered to life. On screen, the staff lounge appeared, the same grainy view Curtis had shown him. Laughter filled the room. Teachers' voices, casual and cruel. These kids are hopeless. Their slang sounds like another language. I can't wait for summer so I don't have to pretend to care. Then came the classroom footage. Dwyer's voice rising. The snap of the rubber band. Maya's quiet sob. The room went dead silent. Even Dwyer couldn't look at the screen. When the video ended, there was no applause, no whispers, just the sound of collective breathing. Slow, ashamed, stunned. Howard cleared his throat. While we acknowledge the emotional weight of this material, it was obtained illegally. Chain of custody is questionable. Therefore, it cannot be used to determine. Malcolm cut in. Illegally or not, it's the truth. Howard snapped. Truth without process is chaos, and process without truth is corruption. The words hung between them like a blade. Keller exhaled. Enough. We've seen what we need to see. He turned to the other board members. We'll take a brief recess before deliberation. The gavel struck wood. Outside the boardroom, the hallway buzzed with whispers. Reporters cornered him immediately. Dr. Reeves, do you believe this hearing is fair? Do you regret your methods? Are you prepared to lose your position? He answered none of them. Laura approached cautiously. You were brilliant in there. He looked at her, tired, distant. Brilliance doesn't matter if they already picked the ending. She touched his arm. I'm sorry I couldn't stand with you sooner. You still can, he said. How? By not letting them turn shame into silence. Her eyes glistened. Whatever happens in there, don't let them take your conviction. He nodded once, then returned to the chamber when they called everyone back. Keller rapped the gavel again. The audience settled. The other board members leaned in close, whispering behind papers. Howard adjusted his tie, pretending not to smirk. Dwyer sat rigid, avoiding every eye. Malcolm stood. Before you vote, I need one final word. Keller sighed. Briefly, he faced the board. I've been accused of breaking rules. I did, but the rules I broke protected silence. The students I protect deserve better than silence. He looked out at the crowd, at Maya sitting beside her mother, at Jordan near the aisle, at Curtis in the back row with his worn work jacket, still damp from rain. You can fire me, Malcolm said, voice steady, but you can't erase what everyone just saw. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't need permission. He stepped back, hands at his sides. Do what you need to. I've already done what I had to. Keller's expression stayed unreadable. He leaned forward, folding his hands atop the desk. Dr. Reeves, he said slowly, the board has reached its conclusion. The audience held its breath. Even the hum of the lights seemed to stop. Keller's next words came out low. Deliberate. This board hereby. The verdict. When justice costs everything. This board hereby. The words hung in the air, suspended between justice and betrayal. Every heartbeat in the room seemed to stall, waiting for what would follow. Superintendent Keller paused, looking over his notes as if weighing the gravity of language, though everyone in that chamber knew the verdict had been written long before tonight. Acknowledges that evidence presented by Dr. Reeves confirms patterns of racially biased conduct within Roosevelt High School. A ripple spread across the audience, murmurs of surprise, relief, disbelief. But Keller continued. This board also concludes that Dr. Reeves's methods, though motivated by moral intent, constituted a breach of district policy and professional protocol. The murmurs sharpened into whispers. Keller leaned forward, tone flat and deliberate. Therefore, effective immediately, Dr. Reeves will be placed on an administrative leave of absence, pending review of district oversight procedures.
Silence.
It wasn't the punishment of a guilty man. It was the exile of an inconvenient one. Malcolm didn't move. The words washed over him like cold rain. Leave of absence. The kind of phrase bureaucracies use when they want a man gone without saying so. Keller's gaze flicked toward the cameras at the back of the room. We thank Dr. Reeves for his contributions to transparency and for his commitment to our students' well-being. The room erupted. Reporters shouting questions, students clapping hesitantly, teachers shifting in unease. Howard wore his trademark diplomatic smile. Dwyer kept her eyes on the table, face pale and still. Only Laura, in the front row, allowed herself a single tear, not of sadness, but of weary pride. After the hearing, the hallways buzzed like the aftermath of a storm. Malcolm walked through them quietly, the echo of his footsteps cutting through the noise. Reporters surged forward. Dr. Reeves, do you consider this a victory? Will you appeal the board's decision? Do you regret going undercover? He said nothing. There was no version of truth that fit into a soundbite. Denise Carter walked beside him. Calm as ever. You made history tonight, she said. He gave a faint smile. History doesn't pay the price. People do. They stepped outside into the cool night. The parking lot lights glowed faintly through the mist. A few students waited near the edge of the crowd, holding handmade signs. We believe you, thank you, Dr. Reeves. Truth matters. He stopped for a moment, eyes tracing the faces, young, defiant, hopeful. That, he thought, was the real verdict. Inside the building, the fallout had already begun. By morning, the district issued a press release carefully crafted to sound like reform. The Roosevelt School District remains committed to equity and ethical leadership. Following recent findings, staff will undergo cultural competency training, and several personnel will be reassigned to new roles. No names, no accountability, just words scrubbed clean for public digestion. Dwyer was quietly moved to another school in the same district. Howard remained vice principal, but was stripped of disciplinary oversight. And Keller, the man who had orchestrated the silence, announced he'd be retiring early to pursue consulting. It was the illusion of progress without the discomfort of justice. Malcolm read the statement over his morning coffee, his suspension letter lying beside it like a bruise. Dana came up behind him, resting a hand on his shoulder. You did what you said you would. I told the truth, he said softly. They rewarded it with absence. She kissed the top of his head. Sometimes absence is how truth echoes. He looked at her. Do you think they'll fix anything?
I think you already started it.
He returned to the school later that week to clear his office. It was after hours, the halls dim, empty, and still carrying the faint smell of wax from the janitorial shift. His own reflection followed him in the glass trophy cases. One man walking through the ghost of his own achievement. The nameplate on his door still read Dr. Malcolm Reeves, Principal. He paused before touching it, as if the metal itself might remember him. Inside, the office looked smaller than it ever had. The certificates on the wall seemed meaningless now, and the books on the shelf, volumes on ethics, leadership, reform, felt like relics from a naive time. He packed slowly. A photo of Jordan as a child. A stack of student essays he never got to read. A framed quote from his father that once sat on his desk. Truth costs more than silence ever will. He stopped when he saw it, tracing the letters with his thumb. Behind him, the door creaked open. Laura stood there, pale but resolute. They told me you'd be here, she said. I wanted to say goodbye before they changed the locks, he replied. You're not gone, she said softly. You just moved the line, so someone else can stand there. He smiled faintly. And you? They demoted me. I'll be teaching part-time next semester.
I'm sorry.
Don't be. I'd rather lose position than my reflection. She walked closer, eyes shimmering. You made them see it, Malcolm. Even if they pretend not to. He exhaled. Then maybe it was worth it. Laura hesitated. What will you do now? He glanced around the office, at the shelves, the empty desk, the mop in the corner that somehow still leaned where it always had. Maybe clean a few more floors, he said. Just different ones. As she left, the silence returned. Malcolm packed the last of his files and placed the keys on the desk. His hand lingered there, the weight of finality pressing down harder than expected. He was about to turn off the light when he noticed something under the edge of the keyboard, a small folded piece of paper, half hidden. The handwriting was uneven, the pencil strokes faint. He unfolded it carefully. Thank you for seeing me.
No name. No date.
Just 6 words written in a child's hand. He stared at it, the corners of the paper trembling between his fingers. The simplicity of it broke through every layer of exhaustion, every bruise left by policy, every quiet betrayal. It was the one verdict that mattered. He sat back in his chair, the room blurring through sudden tears. For a long time he said nothing. He didn't have to. Outside the sun was setting, washing the hallway in gold. Through the glass he could see the janitorial crew moving down the corridor, mops sliding in rhythmic silence, the same rhythm he had once used to listen, to see, to understand. He rose slowly, folded the note, and slipped it into his breast pocket. That night, the local news called the hearing a measured resolution. The district called it restorative. Social media called it justice. But Malcolm knew what it really was. A trade, truth for peace, exposure for comfort. He sat in his living room, the TV flickering muted headlines across the walls. Jordan sat beside him, quiet. Dana on the couch opposite, reading the room instead of the news. Finally, Jordan said, You won, right? Malcolm smiled faintly. Depends what winning means. People are saying, you changed everything. He looked down at his hands. If I did, I changed it from the outside. Jordan frowned. So what happens now? Malcolm turned off the television. Now I watch what happens when truth stops whispering. Days passed. The media storm moved on to the next controversy. The district buried its reforms in committees and memos. The teachers learned to smile for cameras. But inside the classrooms, something had shifted. Invisible but irreversible. Students spoke louder now. Maya wore her hair exactly as she wanted. The janitorial crew laughed freely in the hallways. Even silence sounded different, less fearful, more aware. And on one of the school's bulletin boards, among flyers and announcements, someone had pinned a photocopy of a handwritten note. Thank you for seeing me. No one knew who had put it there, but everyone knew what it meant. The following week, Malcolm received a letter from an unfamiliar return address, a nonprofit education center in Chicago. Dr. Reeves, we followed your case. We're building a new initiative for ethical school reform and truth-based leadership. We'd like you to lead it. He read it twice, then looked at the small folded note still in his wallet. The handwriting smudged, now from handling. But the message still clear. He exhaled slowly, somewhere between grief and relief.
Maybe leaving Roosevelt wasn't an ending. Maybe it was the first clean surface on which something new could begin.
He placed the letter on the table, opened his laptop and began drafting his response. The cursor blinked against the blank screen, like a heartbeat finding rhythm again. In the office he'd left behind, the janitors finished their shift. Curtis paused by the principal's empty desk. He noticed the sunlight catching something small near the corner, a second note Malcolm must have missed. He picked it up, just one line, written in neat handwriting. The truth was worth it. Curtis smiled faintly and slipped it into his pocket. Then he turned off the light. The next morning, the sun rose over Roosevelt High. The same building, the same walls, but a different air. For the first time, silence didn't mean surrender. It meant reflection. And somewhere in a small apartment across town, Dr. Malcolm Reeves opened a new folder on his laptop and typed the title, Project Seeing, a school that listens. He leaned back, eyes closed, hearing again the voice of the child who'd left the note. Thank you for seeing me. He whispered into the quiet, no thank you for letting me. Outside, the world went on, unaware that a single man's quiet defiance had just planted something larger than policy, belief. The full circle, What the world learns from silence. The first chill of autumn rolled across the city when Malcolm Reeves returned to Roosevelt High. It had been 8 months since the hearing. 8 months since he'd handed in his keys, folded the note that said "Thank you for seeing me," and walked away from the only building that had ever truly broken and built him at the same time. The morning air carried that familiar blend of asphalt, dew, and faint floor wax. A scent that, for reasons he couldn't explain, still steadied him. He parked across the street, watching the steady stream of students file through the gates. Same backpacks, same laughter, but a different current underneath, lighter, freer. The headlines were gone. The controversy had faded. But the echoes of what happened here still lived in every corner. He adjusted the collar of his coat, grabbed the visitor badge from his pocket, and crossed the street. Inside, the halls of Roosevelt looked brighter. Not newer, but somehow awake. The walls were freshly painted with student murals, hands of every shade raised toward the word unity. Lockers no longer carried slurs scrawled in marker. The air didn't hum with tension. It hummed with energy. Students nodded as he passed. Some whispered his name under their breath, a story that had outlived the news cycle but survived in memory. At the front office, a young receptionist greeted him. She couldn't have been more than 22, probably a new hire. "Visitor pass?" she asked with a smile. He handed her his ID. "Reason for visit?" "Just checking on old floors," he said. She laughed softly, handing him the pass. "You're the Dr. Reeves, aren't you? My mom watched your hearing online. She said you reminded her of Thurgood Marshall." Malcolm smiled faintly. He was taller. She grinned, then added quietly, "Welcome back, sir." He walked down the main corridor, the same stretch where he'd once mopped in silence, overhearing teachers' careless words. Now, bulletin boards displayed photos of student leaders and club announcements for a new equity council. A poster read, "Voices matter, speak loud, listen hard." He stopped outside room. Through the glass he saw Maya Thompson, older now, more confident, leading a group presentation about social justice movements. Her hair was free, beautiful, unapologetic. The same hair that once drew punishment now framed her pride. The teacher, a new young black woman in a patterned blouse, watched her with open admiration. Malcolm felt something loosen in his chest, not triumph, exactly, but relief. Change had found its footing. As the bell rang, Maya looked up and caught his eye through the window. Her face broke into a radiant smile. She mouthed the words, "Thank you." He lifted a hand in acknowledgement before turning away. In the cafeteria, laughter replaced the whispers that once crawled across the walls. The lunch staff played jazz from a small speaker near the counter. He noticed Curtis, the janitor who had risked everything to bring him the hidden footage, wiping down tables. When Curtis saw him, his eyes widened, then softened into a grin. "Well, look what the truth dragged back in," he said. Malcolm chuckled. "Didn't expect you'd still be here." "Somebody's got to keep the place honest," Curtis replied. "Besides, they treat us different now. Better pay, new uniforms, no more invisible men." "That's something." Curtis leaned on his mop. "That's everything. Kids say good morning now. Teachers say thank you. Even got a staff rep for maintenance on the diversity committee." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "You?" Curtis winked. "Who else?" They both laughed, the kind of quiet laughter that comes from shared survival. Then Curtis's expression softened. "You did what you came to do, Doc. Might have cost you your chair, but you bought this peace." "Peace," Malcolm repeated, tasting the word. "Feels lighter than victory." "That's 'cause victory got weight. Peace just got work." They shook hands, a silent pact between men who'd cleaned up more than floors. He visited Laura's classroom next. She was still there. Smaller schedule, fewer students, but brighter somehow. On the wall behind her desk hung a quote, "Courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's the whisper that says try again tomorrow." She looked up as he entered. "Malcolm," she said softly, stepping forward. "You came. I promised," he said. They hugged a brief grounding embrace. "I heard about your new project," she said. "Project Seeing." He nodded. "We're building leadership programs for schools around the country, training principals to confront bias from inside their systems." Her smile warmed. "You turned exile into blueprint." He looked around her classroom, students of every shade working together on a timeline of civil rights history. "This place looks alive," he said. "It's healing," she replied. "Still has scars, but they remind us what not to forget." He studied her for a moment. "You staying?" "As long as they'll have me. They'll need you." She squeezed his hand. So will they wherever you go next. By late afternoon, the halls began to empty. The final bell loomed. That familiar echo through time. Malcolm found himself standing at the end of the corridor, watching sunlight pour through the high windows, the same golden light that once revealed shadows. A few students passed by, waving goodbye. "See you at the assembly, Dr. Reeves," one called out. He smiled. "Not my assembly anymore." "But you started it," another shouted. Maybe that was enough. He walked toward the entrance, where a mural now covered an entire wall, painted by students. It depicted hands reaching upward toward an open book. Across it, in bold letters, someone had written, "Truth costs, pay anyway." He stopped in front of it for a long moment. Those words belonged to him, though he'd never spoken them aloud. They were the lesson his silence had written. Outside, the afternoon sun spread over the schoolyard. He could hear laughter, basketballs bouncing, teachers calling out reminders. It almost felt like normal, except normal had never felt this honest. Dana pulled up in their car, waving from the window. "You ready?" she called. He smiled. "In a minute." She nodded, understanding. He turned back toward the building once more, just to look, to see what the fight had bought. It was cleaner now, in every sense. Not perfect, but clean enough for truth to breathe. The bell rang. Final dismissal. Students poured out in a rush of chatter and backpacks, flooding the front steps like a river. Malcolm watched them go. The energy, the diversity, the small acts of kindness that no report ever measures. Then, as the stream thinned, a figure entered through the side door, pushing a yellow janitor's cart. New uniform. Head down, moving quietly, deliberately.
The new cleaner.
He was young, maybe late 20s, skin brown like polished oak, shoulders squared but eyes weary. Malcolm watched as he adjusted his gloves and began sweeping near the lockers. A few teachers passed him without a word. One of them, an older woman he didn't recognize, muttered under her breath, "They'll let anyone in here these days." Malcolm froze. The words weren't shouted, just whispered, the kind of poison that hides behind civility. The young janitor heard it too. His broom slowed, his posture stiffening. But he said nothing, just kept sweeping. Malcolm felt something tighten in his chest, an ache both familiar and unbearable. He took a step forward, ready to intervene, but stopped himself. The young man looked up for a moment, eyes meeting his. No words passed between them, only understanding. A quiet recognition that history has a cruel way of testing those who inherit it. The teacher disappeared down the hall. The janitor resumed his work, head bowed slightly, but this time his movements were steady, deliberate, not in defeat, but defiance. Malcolm lingered there, watching. Every sweep of that broom echoed like memory, the rhythm of revelation. Dana honked the car horn softly outside, a reminder of life beyond these walls. He turned toward the exit, then paused once more at the threshold. He whispered to himself almost like prayer, "Stay awake, Roosevelt. Don't go blind again." And as he stepped into the sunlight, the sound of the broom carried faintly behind him, steady, sure and unending. The world hadn't changed completely, but it had started. And sometimes that was the only kind of redemption truth could afford. In the car, Dana reached across and squeezed his hand. "How was it?" she asked. He looked back at the building in the rearview mirror, at the doors closing, the students laughing, the janitor sweeping. "It's learning," he said quietly. "Learning what?" "That seeing never ends." She smiled faintly. "You sound like a principal again." He chuckled. "No. Just a cleaner who finally understood what clean means." They drove off slowly, the school fading behind them, bathed in the orange light of evening, an image caught between ending and beginning. Behind him, inside those walls, the new janitor's broom scraped across the tile one last time, before the lights dimmed. Somewhere, a teacher muttered. Somewhere, a student listened. And somewhere, a story waited to begin again. Some stories don't end when the credits roll. They live in every hallway, every classroom, every moment someone is judged before being seen. If this story made you feel something, don't let it fade into silence. Stand where truth was buried. Type yes if you believe in justice and subscribe if this broke your heart.